Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 35 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. As always, I am Trevor Dame, and as always, he's Matt Feuerstein. And as occasionally, we have our Boston correspondent, who you might know from Joe versus the World, the great wrestling podcast. You might know him from Joe Gagne's Funtime Pro Wrestling Arcade on YouTube, and you might know him from the 5-Star Match Game podcast wrestling game show on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. It's Matt Feuerstein, who's not the guest, and it's Joe Gagne, who is the guest. Hello, gentlemen.
Stellar introduction there. Not confusing at all to the listener.
I mean, I thought it was bad, so. Just kidding. Just kidding. You're the best.
I can find replacements, you know. I can...
You do well to replace me, I agree.
Oh, no. But if you want to listen to a podcast, or many podcasts that are much better hosted than me and have much more professional segues, then you could try all the other podcasts here on the Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network. And as always, I always like to spotlight some podcasts. We have to say goodbye to This Week in Wrestling, which has ended its great run, so... But, you know, with the Circle of Wrestling podcast life, we have a couple new additions to the network. One would be Bigfoot Pro Wrestling Podcast, which is all about Pacific Northwest wrestling. Hey, I live in the Pacific Northwest. And the other one would be Days of Thunder. That's right, a podcast exclusively devoted to watching old episodes of WCW Thunder. So,
and those guys, if they have a Patreon, everybody's got to give as much as possible to that Patreon because they are earning their money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, so, as always, check it out. Lots of good podcasts there. Some new stuff going on. And apart from that, I guess we should just get to... at this point in the podcast, I always go to any news that between the shows. And there's not really a piece of news, but there is a quote. And I thought I wanted to get your guys' opinion on something that comes up in this quote. Especially Matt, because I think Matt has a far better memory for these kind of things than I do. So this is a Mike Johnson bit when he was talking about the news surrounding the show. Mike Johnson, a PW Insider, he writes, "The SAT are pretty much done with Ring of Honor, although I could see them back in down the line. The promotion is high on Dunn and Marcos and the Outcast Killers moving up the tag ranks in the future. Dunn and Marcos are really popular and have a fun gimmick, while the Killers have yet to be really showcased, but have shown great mic and ring skills when utilized. With the aforementioned, the Briscoes, the Backseat Boys, Special K, and the Carnage Crew, Ring of Honor has the best tag scene of any promotion right now, including WWE. So I'm just going to ask you two, because my memory for timelines is bad, but taking us back to early 2004, do you think that is the best tag division in all of wrestling?
I feel like WWE's tag division at the time was not good. They did have enough tag teams to have 2 4-way tag team title matches at WrestleMania 20, which is only like a month after this. But they were bad. Those are both bad 4-ways. So this was the era in TNA where America's Most Wanted was sort of just getting started, kind of, or really maybe not getting started, but they were like starting to find their groove and like having some memorable matches. But I don't remember... Like, there was also Triple X, but I don't really remember, like, how many different teams there were. I guess the main thing that I think you're trying to get at, and I agree with you, is that Ring of Honor's tag division was not good at all. They didn't really have very many good tag team matches ever, except, maybe a Briscoes title match every once in a while. And Dunn and Marcos, and the Outcast Killers, they did move up the tag ranks, I guess. And definitely Dunn and Marcos especially, they ended up having more competitive matches over the next couple of years, but the Outcast Killers never really did much of anything. And I guess I'm not really answering your question, but ROH's tag division wasn't good, so if they were the best, then yeah, it was sad.
No, I think what you just did was clarify that this is almost like the tagline to the incredible, and I mean that sarcastically, Alien vs. Predator movies, which is, it doesn't matter who wins, we lose. I think that you illustrated that wasn't a great, being the best tag team division in early 2004 wasn't exactly a huge prize to win.
Yeah, what tag teams did WWE have? They had, the Bashams.
And Haas and Benjamin, didn't they?
Yeah, Haas and Benjamin were still around, and they had a Scotty 2 Hottie and Rikishi, right? And Mark Jindrak and Chuck Palumbo, weren't they a tag team? And the Dudleys, I guess, were sticking around.
Dudleys were still there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like Orton and Batista. I think actually Flair and Batista were the tag team champions right around this time or a little before this.
Yeah, this is around the big Evolution. So so Evolution could have all the belts, not just some grand statement on the tag team prowess of Batista and Ric Flair.
Yeah, so those teams all existed. Rob Van Dam and Booker T.
And I guess it would be worth noting, too, that when Mike Johnson, in that quote, just starts listing Ring of Honor tag teams, the second team he lists, just after the Briscoes, the Backseat Boys, this turns out to be their swan song in Ring of Honor. So,
right.
I mean, it's weaker than even he ends up knowing, because this is it for them, actually. He probably did not know at the time, but...
Right, and the Backseat Boys, I mean, Trent Acid had some good matches in ROH, but the Backseat Boys didn't really.
No.
Not at all. So, yeah, I mean, the Backseat Boys were a good team, I guess probably elsewhere, and they were charismatic, but if that's what you're, hanging your hat on for your tag team division, then shows you that things aren't very good since they did not have their best work in Ring of Honor by a long shot.
So I guess I just want to get your opinions on that, and I think that brings us, we can start on the show proper, which is the Ring of Honor 2nd Anniversary Show. It took place February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2004, at the National Guard Armory in Braintree, Massachusetts, in front of a reported crowd of 500 fans. Now, Joe, I want to get a bit of your perspective on this, but first, I just want to set up a bit of the saga here, because as it seemed to be the norm at this time, Ring of Honor had some troubles with securing places to run in Massachusetts. It's a long saga, and there's a couple quotes here that I thought, and then I actually did a little research, and it builds to something I think that's kind of humorous, but we'll start off with just a quote from The Observer at the time. Dave Meltzer writes, Ring of Honor once again had to move its building location in the Boston area. The belief is that there is a local promoter who calls up the buildings they've been using, which have been local schools, saying bad things about the product and the promotion. Schools don't want any controversy or bad press, so they've canceled the dates. The February 14th show will now be in Braintree, Massachusetts at the National Guard Armory on Union Street, and they've already booked return dates for the May 15th and August 28th. So keep that in mind, keep that little quote in mind as we move on to a little clip I got from a Mike Johnson interview of Gabe Sapolsky. So Mike Johnson asks, recently Ring of Honor has had to juggle buildings in the Massachusetts area. I know you were originally from Massachusetts, so what is it like from that point of view to see so many problems? And Gabe Sapolsky responds, it's such a shame that some worthless individuals feel the need to try to bring us down for no reason other than jealousy. It's so selfish. If you don't like me or anyone with RF video, don't take it on trying to stop us from running because you are only hurting the wrestlers and the fans. At least think of them before you pull this stuff. We have moved on and we have a new home in Boston now. It's the National Guard Armory in Braintree, Massachusetts. It's a great location just off I-93 with plenty of parking. It's also a few hundred feet from the Braintree stop on the Red Line, so it is easy to get to by public transportation, which is especially important up there. We have already secured the building for a number of dates, so we won't be bouncing around anymore. It is very frustrating, but at the same time, it just makes us stronger and strive to succeed more in that area and make it our home. And I'll also note, going back to The Observer, on this show, it did not make the DVD, but Gary Michael Capetta made the announcement that Braintree would be the company's permanent Boston area location and that nobody would stop Ring of Honor from returning. He apologized for all the venue changes the company made. Rob Feinstein was telling people that they had found out who had been calling venues, forcing them to switch, and, quote, he's been taken care of, unquote. That sounds like Rob had someone killed. I don't think that happened. So if you're wondering if all these quotes are building to something, it is, because I did a bit of research just looking ahead. So This Ring of Honor, after this show in Braintree, ran 3 more shows in 2004 in Massachusetts. The next one was not in Braintree. It was in Lexington, Massachusetts. Then they went back to Braintree. Then they went to Revere, Massachusetts. Then in 2005, they ran in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Then in Dorchester. Then in Woodbridge. Then back in to Dorchester. Followed by Ring of Honor not running anywhere in Massachusetts for 13 months.
Yes, but you're missing an important point here. They all lived at the venue in Braintree. They said that was their permanent home. So they didn't say they were going to run shows there.
So, Joe, I was just going to ask, as a fan who attended a lot of these Massachusetts shows at the time, do you have any memory of how weird this was that they constantly were moving at this time?
It was unusual, but to me, I always had the shows were never close to where I lived. They were pretty much always at least an hour away. So it never bothered me in the fact, I'll just drive somewhere else for an hour to go see Ring of Honor. And it was it was like a running joke. Like you mentioned, all the different places they run, and then they stopped running for 13 months. And they had an even longer break after that. But it was just all right, I'll go see Ring of Honor. I always had to travel, so it was never a big issue to me.
But was there a venue that you liked and you were like, oh, bummer, I wish they had just gone back there. I like that one.
It's not like they ran Kirk and Hall or any famous building like that. They were all just big National Guard armories. I mean, I remember the drives to Wakefield where traffic was kind of bad around that time. But besides that, they were just buildings, not one I favored over the other. They were buildings. They were hot in the summer, and they were always an hour away. So it really didn't matter to me.
Don't you think, Trevor, that all this news, about what's happening and all this stuff, has a very ominous air, reading it that it was taking place right around this time, February 2004, and you're like, oh, you poor saps, you don't know what's coming.
There's definitely a thing, too, later we'll get to, that I just immediately thought of the Rob Feinstein scandal that's coming up soon in the timeline, but also, I really like the idea that, Rob Feinstein was telling people at the event that, we found the guy who's been calling things, he's been taken care of, everything is fine, we finally gotten the last wrinkle out, everything is fine, smooth sailing for Ring of Honor from here on. And there's, literally just a storm cloud right behind his head, I like to imagine at that point. But starting with what we actually see when we start up the DVD, we open with Samoa Joe wearing a suit to celebrate the 2nd anniversary show. He's standing in the ring in an empty building before the fans have been let in. Joe says that around a year ago, he took the Ring of Honor title from a man who was a joke and a disgrace, so ouch to Xavier. And he's taken it around the world and still stands as the champion today. Joe talks about the first pure title champion being crowned tonight while he's in a 4-way, because Joe says only one man can't do the job against him. Joe says the only reason there's a pure title is because no one can beat the Ring of Honor World Champion. Just the standard, usual, short, very good Samoa Joe promo.
It's weird, isn't it weird that like how mean they are to Xavier when he's still there? They act like he's a footnote in history, and he's still having matches, and often being kind of good.
It kind of caught me off guard too, because in Samoa Joe's Ring of Honor done straight shoot interview, they kind of asked him a couple leading questions where they were like, did you feel like you had to rebuild the Ring of Honor World title or build it up after Xavier? And Joe is very complimentary towards Xavier. It's no, what are you talking about? So I was kind of surprised here where basically it's just the title was nothing, and that he doesn't even I don't think he names Xavier.
He doesn't,
by name. He's just oh, he's I took the title off a joke and a disgrace. So
yeah, well, also at the main event spectacles when Carino was doing a list of people who had the ROH title, and they go Xavier, and Carino's who? And he was on the same show.
Yeah. I feel bad. Xavier's just an example of a guy who, we've talked about this before, but he just got pushed too hard too soon, and he's actually probably doing better work now than he was doing as champ, except for the incredible Paul London matches. But it's just too late. He's already gotten that stigma on him.
Exactly.
It's done for him. Next, we
I was going to say I like Joe's suit a lot. He looked very fancy.
Yeah, this might have been the first time, if I was watching at the time, that you had probably seen Samoa Joe in a spiffy formal wear, so different side of Joe. He's dressing like the champ now, at least for this special occasion. We cut to a backstage promo from the Prophecy of Allison Danger, Dan Moff, and BJ Whitmer. Danger says they're suffering because Christopher Daniels is still out injured, but he's left them a plan. Danger says they have hatred, desire, and courage running through them. Moff tells BJ that he can't stand him, but not bringing the title to Christopher Daniels would hurt him even more. Moff goes on to say another thing that drives him even crazier than Whitmer is Low Key, who he meets in the ring tonight in the four-way for the first time since Low Key legit knocked him out in August. BJ jabs at Moff, saying Key might knock him out again tonight, and then Allison Danger's basically like, you two quit bitching, let's get the title. So the same promo we've been seeing quite a bit from these guys, dissension in the ranks. I don't know if either of you have anything to say about this.
Nope.
Apparently not. And so we move on to the start of the show proper inside the building. Christopher Daniels music hits, and someone that appears to be dressed up as Christopher Daniels comes out in the dark preacher getup with the little, I don't know what you would call it, the doily or the, not towel, but over the head.
But we've already had it spoiled that he's not there, so...
Yeah, I never realized that, but exactly, yeah, we literally see a promo segment telling us that Christopher Daniels isn't there, followed immediately by someone pretending to be Christopher Daniels, spoiling the surprise. Because,
go ahead.
Go on.
I bet it worked really well in the building, though.
Yeah, because it does.
Yes.
It is revealed, in fact, to be CM Punk, which gets quite loud boos. And yeah, this is one of those neat little Ring of Honor things where if you were a fan of this product at the time and watched Punk go to WWE, he definitely lifted a few of his more successful ideas there. So he would basically redo this with the Jeff Hardy feud, coming out to the Jeff Hardy music and full Jeff Hardy face paint and regalia. But this is, I believe, the first time he had ever done anything like this. We get a loud "We Want Daniels" chant. Punk gets on the mic and he says he's ended the Christopher Daniels reign in Ring of Honor and says a new era starts tonight, the era of straight edge, and the Second City Saints are going to go after every single title Ring of Honor has. Tonight he's going to get the Pure title. In Chicago, he and Colt Cabana are going to beat the Briscoes for the tag titles in a match that Punk says Bobby Heenan negotiated for him. And then after that, he's going after Samoa Joe and the Ring of Honor world title. Punk goes to take off the Daniels outfit, and that's when John Walters' music hits. Out he comes. We get a loud "fuck him up, Walters fucking up" chant as he enters the ring. Punk bails to the outside, and he resumes his promo there where he says he's from Chicago and the Bears kicked New England's ass in 1986, and he's going to kick Walters' ass tonight. Punk then dedicates the match to Mike Ditka. So
this is a tragic consequence of the Boston sports renaissance. His heels don't have anything to talk about now. This is just after the Patriots' second Super Bowl, by the way, so it's gotten no better. I just want to add for a little historical context. There was a mystery entrant in this tournament, and there were seeds, oddly enough. I guess Punk was a 7th seed, but other names tossed around were Spanky and Jerry Lynn, who did both appear in promos on this as the possible mystery entrant. I don't think Punk was conjectured about at the time.
Yeah, and originally, there was some shuffling with this, because originally the Briscoes were both going to be in this one-night Pure title tournament as singles competitors, and they ended up getting moved out to a tag match. And I guess the other thing we should acknowledge is this is the first time, like, on a DVD release that they've acknowledged. I'm sure it was probably on the website before this, but the idea that Bobby Heenan is going to come in and he's going to manage, CM Punk and the Second City Saints, and he's negotiating them big title matches. And of course, this ends up his role gets largely postponed, and when he does come, it's a much quicker little cameo than a regular thing because of the whole fallout from the Rob Feinstein scandal, not the Rob Fobstein scandal. So yeah, that would have been interesting to see how much more of a role Bobby Heenan would have had if he hadn't have gotten scared off by the scandal. And that brings us to the first match of the night, the first match in the Pure Wrestling title tournament. CM Punk defeated John Walters via pinfall in 13 minutes, 1 second, when he reversed a roll-up into a bridging pin. Matt, what did you think about this as an opener?
All right, well, first thing I noticed, Todd Sinclair, was this his debut? Because I don't remember noticing him in previous shows.
I thought the same thing. I was going to ask you that. So the fact that we're both asking that, I'm going to assume this was his debut in Ring of Honor.
Well, that's an answer to a trivia question right there. But I thought this was one of the best matches of the tournament. I thought that the crowd was really hot for this. And Joe, remember last time we were talking about how shitty that crowd was at?
Yes.
Where was that again? The War of the Wire.
That was in Framingham.
Yeah. Well, apparently Braintree's people are way more amped than Framingham's people because the crowd was really good on this whole show. I thought.
Yes. I will say that there was I think a New York bus trip up there, so maybe that did help to contribute. Loath that I am to give credit to New York.
Yeah, come on, take some credit, buddy.
All right.
Yeah, it's the crowd this whole night was rocking. I thought, and they really added a lot to this match. It was kind of nice to see to hear Ray Murrow back in action. Not that Chris Nelson was bad, but I don't know, something felt like home about Murrow and Murrow, yeah, Mark Murrow and Lovey. But okay, so one thing that happened before the match was that Punk said Boston is riding a Super Bowl wave, and this one is for Ditka. So I just wrote the Saints, but not like the New Orleans Saints. You get what I'm saying?
Saints,
the Second City Saints. Get it? All right. So
thank you. Jokes are better when you explain them.
Yes.
The tag was screw that, Joe. That tag was the best part, in my opinion. Got a second laugh from me.
Okay, so top 5 rankings. Saban was number 5, which I put a question mark next to because that was surprising. Walters was 4. Jay Briscoe was 3, and then Moff and Whitmer were tied. So just wanted to say that. Danger comes into the booth to complain about Punk mocking Daniels, and she's like, "Well, we're not going to bother with Punk tonight because we're focusing on their title match." So that was cool. Like, just she comes in there just to be like, "Yeah, we don't care about this." But I thought that the match was good. I thought there were some really cool moves. One of the moves that I thought was the coolest was John Walters was standing on the apron, and he arm dragged Punk over the top rope to the floor, which I don't think I've ever seen before, and I thought it was really cool. And then Walters was working over the arms, and they were just kind of doing like a technical, basic, early thing, and they were working hard. But Murrow goes, "What a pace these athletes are setting here! Not a fast pace, but a technical pace." And I didn't know that technical was a descriptor to describe paces, but apparently it is. And there were some other cool moves too, like Punk does like a tilt-a-whirl stomach breaker, which again, really cool. Walters does a lung blower to the front and the back, which I thought was really cool. And I thought the crowd was just like going nuts for their chop battles and stuff. They did like Punk did like a cross arm Michinoku driver, they were really busting out big moves. They were working a real technical pace, and that was a joke. Waiting for the laugh.
I got so just wound up in thinking about all the moves you were listing that I was just took it at face value. You know what? You've convinced me. It is a technical pace, Matt.
Exactly.
You're right.
Exactly. But I thought the finish was actually really good. I usually don't like those he's pinning him, but then he gets pinned, finishes. But the way Punk did it, where he pulled him back into the pinning combo, I thought was really, really well done. And out of nowhere, but in a good way. I don't know. I thought this was very good. A good opener.
Joe, what did you think?
Yeah, I'm with Matt. This isn't something, you see the lineup, you're like, what's this going to be like? But it was actually really solid. Some really good technical wrestling. They did a lot of scrambling for rope breaks. I imagine that was kind of be a hint of what was to come in the finals. And it's worth noting, pure title matches have their own set of rules, but the only match that had them was the finals, which was a little weird. It's like the King of the Death matches being all straight matches until the end.
Yeah, I noticed that too. That was very weird. It was almost like they didn't want to burn out the crowd on the rules, but then that doesn't exactly show a lot of confidence in the rules then. If it's they
clearly... Yeah, they clearly did not have confidence in the rules since one of the whole shticks of the main event was that the ref was bad at enforcing them.
Yeah, but we'll get to that. It's an interesting match to talk about. But Joe, did you have any more thoughts? I'm sorry to get sidetracked there.
No, I thought the crowd was great. I like the ending where Punk kind of snuck it out, but still in a clean fashion. And crowd heat was great. Crowd was great all night. And I'm not sure, they finally let Walters have that big win at the final battle, and here he's just kind of back losing in the first round to his hometown. Not to say that he should have gone to the finals or beaten Punk or anything like that, but it just seemed like, all right, they made some progress with the guy, and now he's just kind of back where he was.
This should have been a second round match.
Yeah. this was the kind of match where, like, clearly, if you look at the other three matches in the first round, all got probably at least 5 minutes less than this, I think. So clearly, they thought enough of John Walters to give him one of the two or three premier like names in the tournament, and they give him a good amount of time and let him go pretty even with Punk. But yeah, there's still that optics of, it wasn't too long ago that John Walters was saying, I'm not going to lose in my home state anymore, and he like won a match there, and here he is losing there again.
Yeah.
And the crowd, the crowd in Massachusetts likes John Walters. They're pretty behind him. They're very against Punk, especially after the whole Christopher Daniels fake out. So it's a good even face heel dynamic there. And I agree with you guys. I thought this was a good match. It's weird. It's one of the kind of matches where I feel like, Matt, you actually like remind me of a lot of the moves, like the interesting moves during it. It was one of those matches where I remember that I enjoyed it, but as soon as it was done, a lot of the match kind of fell out of my head. I feel like it's almost like a good generic example of the kind of baseline indie match of the times, where there's a little bit of everything in it. There's some innovative moves. They work at a good, not fast pace, but a good, some would say technical pace. And they're doing like a little bit of everything, and it's kind of back and forth 50-50, and you can just tell they're working, like putting in a really good effort. It's hard to describe. It's kind of what I would this is like an example of what I would consider like the generic 2004 like work rate indie wrestling match.
Yeah, but with a really good crowd and talented people doing it.
Yeah, and I should note, like, absolutely, you guys are right. The crowd is very good. It's probably one of the better crowds they've had in a bunch of shows.
Yeah.
So, Punk wins. He goes on. Oh, and I guess the other thing we should mention, other than what Joe mentioned, the weirdness of the tournament, and the rules only for the pure title tournament only being in the final match. I guess we should just talk a little bit, I think, maybe about the philosophy of wrestling tournaments, because I thought one interesting thing about this show was, we can get to it a little bit later, but Low Ki gets randomly inserted into the world title three-way to make it a four-way after he had a falling out with Ring of Honor. And the reason the Observer gives was it was done to boost ticket sales. I guess they were at one point lagging and were not doing well. And it's kind of interesting to think about, like, the nature of tournaments, because for so many indie wrestling companies, I was thinking about this today, the tournaments they do are the biggest shows they do all year. Like, you think of PWG, and the Battle of Los Angeles is the biggest show they do every year. You think of Jakar, and King of Trios is usually like gets the most talk of any show they do in a year, is those tournament shows. And you think of King of Indies, which was a tournament that inspired Ring of Honor, or the original Super 8 tournaments, or IWA Mid-South with the King of the Death matches and Ted Pay. Like, every indie has a big annual tournament, and Ring of Honor, which was like the biggest indie, is the one thing they couldn't really figure out was to have a tournament that really caught on. I guess the closest was the second anniversary show. I mean, not the second anniversary, but the Survival of the Fittest tournament. But that was never a huge draw, and it's just interesting. I was thinking, like, they did this whole big tournament to crown a new champion, and fans weren't interested. But then I realized, well, on paper, if you look at the matches they could advertise, it was Doug Williams versus Chris Sabin, CM Punk versus John Walters, Josh Daniels versus Matt Stryker, and AJ Styles versus Jimmy Rave. And the problem with doing a tournament like this is the two biggest matches they were going to put on, CM Punk and Doug Williams and CM Punk and AJ Styles, they were not allowing themselves to advertise because they were second and third round matches. So
right. I mean, those tournaments that you're talking about, the ones that do really well, they're like big tournaments. Like what? They're like 16 people tournaments, 32 person tournament. Like just like giant tournaments where they can just load up with like all sorts of like big stars or big indie stars. And this was just like CM Punk, AJ Styles, and a bunch of mid-carders. And so obviously it wasn't going to have the same appeal. That's probably another reason ROH never really did that in the same way, is because ROH was booking their guys. They had ongoing storylines. PWG, IWA Mid-South, they would just bring in guys that, weren't often in the promotion. And that was what really bolstered those tournaments. When during the years that they were like being built up as big deals.
They didn't really try anything of the sort till was a Race to the Top tournament. I think they did.
Right, and even that
was just everyone involved in the company.
Yeah, well, that inherently, didn't have the main eventers in it, also.
Yeah, and I mean, people. That's not exactly like a landmark tournament or anything like that. I think people have decent memories of it, but it's not, a big ROH event.
Right.
They tried a couple other one-night tournaments, like next year in 2005, there's the one-night six-man tag tournament, and there's the
Best of the Super Juniors, which was a disaster.
Yeah, so I think maybe the difference is, with most other indies, a big tournament was just like an excuse to splurge and get a lot of fly-ins and get a lot of dream matches and interesting pairings that you wouldn't normally see in that federation. Where with Ring of Honor, the focal, it usually wasn't like we're flying in a bunch of extra guys. It was more, it's the guys you've already seen in a tournament format, and we're hoping that the tournament, just the idea of a tournament, adds a bit more of a draw to it, which it doesn't. I think like something like Battle of Los Angeles, the draw isn't, it's PWG's doing a tournament. The draw is, they're like flying in extra guys from Europe and Australia and Japan and wherever, and it's like we're getting a super deluxe PWG card.
And, this also just really exposes how weak, not in terms of like skill, but just like in star power, ROH's mid-card was, Matt Stryker, Chris Sabin. I love Chris Sabin. I'm higher on Matt Stryker than probably most people, but we've talked about it a million times. These guys were not fountains of charisma at this point, and they didn't come off like stars, and they didn't have interesting characters. So there was nothing to emotionally invest in. We've talked about it a million times, and they needed to be freshened up badly. And I think that aspect of the show kind of showed that off.
And that brings us to the second match in the first round of the Pure Wrestling title tournament. Doug Williams defeats Chris Sabin via pinfall in 8 minutes, 18 seconds with the Chaos Theory German suplex. Joe, what did you think? Not a long match, but still, Doug Williams, we don't get him often in Ring of Honor, so a treat there whenever you get to see him.
Indeed, yeah. Doug coming out to song 2 by Blur, the Woohoo song. So some great theme songs on this DVD. It really took me back. This one was a little, I wish it had gone a little bit longer, had a little more meat to the bones, but it's always a joy to see Doug Williams wrestle his style. He's so good. He's so refreshing in an environment like this. I think Chris Sabin is almost comical, like how underpushed he is in ROH compared to TNA at the time. But that's a good back and forth match. I thought, Williams worked over the neck. That played into the finish a bit, which I appreciated a bit. And Williams won. It was perfectly fine. I like the opener a bit better than this, but this was a solid if unspectacular routing.
Yeah, this was not. I didn't find it as good as the opener. I mean, it's hard. An 8-minute match is only going to be allowed to be so good, but I enjoyed this because most of this match was Doug Williams just doing his thing on offense, and actually, that to me was the story of the match. Where usually in indie wrestling tournaments, it's not always, but often, whoever, you can almost tell who's going to lose just as you watch the match, because the tendency is if someone's going out in the first round, you give them a lot of the match because they're not going to get a second chance to show the crowd what they can do, and the other guy is. And this match flips the script on that, because of this 8-minute match, I would say Doug Williams dominates maybe the first 6 minutes, and it's only in the final couple minutes where Chris Sabin finally gets one big sustained burst of big offense, and he does things like he hits the cradle shock and things like that. But for the most part, I was shocked by just how much, Chris Sabin comes all this way to do this show. He gets 8 minutes, and really he's only on offense, I would say, for about 2 minutes tonight. But I thought he did by the end get just enough where it didn't feel like a complete squash, and I thought Doug Williams looked great. If there is one problem I have to this, it's one of my problems with tournaments sometimes in general, which is because guys have to reserve keep some gas in the tank for multiple matches. It feels like we probably would have gotten a better Doug Williams versus Chris Sabin match, or a better Doug Williams CM Punk match. Not that match was by any means bad either, but the fact is both of them feel like he's splitting his energy among two matches, and it probably would have been more fun to see what he could have done if he just could have devoted himself going, this is my one match for the night. But again, that's a problem just of tournaments, one-night tournaments in general. Matt, what did you think?
Well, like both of you said, I was very happy to see Doug Williams. I always love him. His offense was awesome. But there was actually something I disliked about this match, which was it felt like two separate matches. Like Doug dominated for so long that I thought that Sabin's comeback felt implausible. Like, it just like there wasn't like some trick that he had. He just came back. He just all of a sudden he stopped Doug Williams in a move and was on offense and was on very, for that final stretch, extended period of offense. And I thought like the tone, it was just too dramatic a shift for me. But the offense itself was good. So I thought this match was fine. But that, made me not get into it as much as I might have otherwise gotten into it.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like, this one of those matches where I bet you neither guy even really remembers much about that match.
Yeah.
But I would just love, because it's such a different structure for what you would expect from a match in that position, where Doug really eats him alive for like 6 minutes, just outsmarts him at every turn and really dominates the match. And then all of a sudden, like you were saying, it's almost as if they just flick a switch and all of a sudden Sabin's hitting big moves like they're in the final stretch of a match where they went back and forth for 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, but still, it was fun action. There was a nice little moment where Sabin got his neck worked on the whole match, and he tries to suplex Doug Williams, and he can't, so he turns it into a swinging neck breaker out of the same position instead. So stuff like that I thought was fun little details. But yeah, 8 minutes, so you can't really fall in love with it, but it was enjoyable for what it was. Immediately after the match, we get a backstage promo from Doug Williams. Doug puts over Sabin and says that he underestimated him. In fact, he didn't even know he was going to wrestle him till he got to the building tonight. Doug reminds us that he's beaten Jay Briscoe and Bryan Danielson in the same night before. That was at the Road to the Title first round show at the first year of Ring of Honor. And he says he's wrestled 60 minutes before, so he says the pure title is made for him. And
funny thing about Doug Williams is that, like, because he's been there so little, it's like every time Doug Williams is there, they like the main thing they talk about is the road to the title. They're like, man, he really made a star in one night with Road to the Title. Remember that classic Road to the Title? And I'm very interested to see like if like when he's there in like 05 and 06 and 07, if they're still mentioning Road to the Title. I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, it's funny because he kind of occupies the space that there aren't many. I don't know if there's anyone else in Ring of Honor at this point that really has that kind of role of where he's basically like the special guest star where, he comes in when he can, and so he never really has a feud. So he always is just referencing like the one or two most notable matches he's had. And so, like you said, at this point, it's like he's referenced that Road to the Title thing in the 60-minute match like 5 times now. Yeah. It's like every time, remember that time we went to that lake and we went fishing. It was a good time. It's like he's always just referencing that one great time he had here. But moving on, the Ring of Honor Pure Title Tournament rolls on. Third first-round match. Matt Striker defeats Josh Daniels by submission in 8 minutes, 29 seconds when he made him tap out to the Striker lock. And this was I would say I enjoyed this match the least of the three, but I still was entertained. But I thought it was just, again, it's an 8-minute match. It's average. I think these are both two guys that maybe could use a bit more personality, but Chris Daniels especially, I wrote in my notes, Chris Daniels is very reminiscent of Chris Benoit in terms of stature.
Josh Daniels.
I mean, yeah, God, two reminiscent names too. But yeah, in terms of stature, body type, the moves he does, he is also kind of missing. He is missing the charisma and emotional intensity that Chris Benoit had. But given what happened to Chris Benoit, maybe it's good that you did not have the emotional intensity of a Chris Benoit.
Well, there's also a very strong Davey Richards vibe, which Davey Richards was often compared to Benoit at certain points in his career too.
Yeah, so, but, he's lots of hard chops in this match, lots of suplexes in this match, as you'd expect from a guy that has a pretty heavy Chris Benoit influence. And it's just another match where it's short and there's a good level of action, but it's nothing, it's very forgettable. Like, I'm struggling to remember, like, really specific moments here that really caught my attention, apart from it just being kind of a pleasant way to spend 8 minutes. Matt, what did you think?
I think I might have actually liked this more than the Sabin and Williams match. Not by much. Definitely, it was a charisma. It was lacking in charisma. I wrote at the beginning, like even before the match started, I wrote charisma party, but I was being sarcastic. That's my secret. Yeah, but it was all about like the strikes. But I did think that they both seemed motivated. Stryker, he busted out some of his big moves. He did the run up, suplex, and it was very well timed for a 2 count. I thought that I liked the way the ending went, where he just like grabbed the striker lock real quick, and it was an immediate tap out. I thought it was funny when the announcers, or I guess it was Gabe, who said, "There's no doubt there will be title belts in the future of both these men." Definitely not in ROH. There wasn't.
Yeah, just not here.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what titles Josh Daniels held. I imagine there are a lot of indies. I imagine he held some. But yeah, I thought it was good energy. Like, it was short, but I thought they had what I would put as interesting chemistry. Like, they could have had a really good match in another setting, with maybe different kinds of stakes to it. I don't know. But for a short match, I thought they did a pretty good job. It wasn't long enough for their lack of personality to really take that much away. I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah. Joe, what did you think about this match between two surefire future champions?
I like when they mentioned Josh Daniels being in the tournament. They referenced his win over Steve Corino, and I was like, Homicide ran in and mugged Steve Corino during that match. And Corino even referenced it later on, what a joke it was.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, maybe just say like, he's a lot of the talent in the back speaks highly of him. That's why he's here. This didn't do a lot for me. I mean, it was fine, but it was just kind of, they just wrestled for a bit. And I know Rob Viper on Twitter posted 3 vomit emojis when I referenced this match. I would only give it 2. I would not be that harsh. But no, it was fine. The point was to kind of get the striker lock over as this, a move that can get a tap out immediately, which it didn't really play into anything.
Although
a little bit later on, but not quite to that level. But this was fine.
It was funny to me where Gabe, in putting it over, he kind of had an awkward choice of words, because he says, I can't, when Josh Daniels taps out to the striker lock, he says, I can't believe he tapped that quick. And that I think Gabe is trying to put over like how deadly the striker lock can be, but the way he phrased it kind of sounded like, I can't believe Josh Daniels is such a pussy. Like, can't believe he tapped out. Like, I was like, it's not coming out the way you think it is, Gabe. And the other little bit of Gabe commentary I enjoyed here was he puts over that Matt Stryker is reaping the rewards of winning the Field of Honor tournament. He says by getting put in tournaments like this and in number 1 contender matches, that's signed. These are the rewards he's getting by winning that tournament, leaving out the fact that other people in this tournament were also in the Field of Honor and lost and are also getting those same benefits. And I think Gabe also says on commentary, he says something like, Stryker was started in Ring of Honor 14 months ago, and he was in the opening match, and he's been climbing the ladder ever since. I'll just note, Matt Stryker was in the opening match 2 shows ago, the show after he won the Field of Honor tournament.
And he didn't even get to be the first seed or the second seed in this tournament.
Yeah, so...
you think he'd give him like the number 1 seed just like to pretend the Field of Honor mattered?
It's just so yeah. It's one of those. It's just something we were talking about the last show or two, Matt, where it's like clearly Gabe wants to put over the importance of the wins he's been giving Matt Stryker, but he's not following through because, rightfully so, he realizes Matt Stryker isn't going to work at the top of the card, but he's still trying to act like, the Field of Honor tournament, all these things. He's trying to act like Matt Stryker is marching up the card when really he's basically in the same position he was probably 6 months ago.
Exactly. Also, I will say this about this match. Any other ROH show, this match probably plays to mostly silence, but the crowd was pretty hot for it, which just goes to show what a good crowd this was.
Yeah, again, really good crowd this night. Joe, you and your random unknown New York bus friends outdid yourself. So
yeah, well, you certainly made up for that terrible crowd at the last show.
Phew.
After the match, we get a backstage Matt Stryker promo. He says he's never been hit harder in his life than Josh Daniels.
Daniels, come on.
Look,
Poor guy.
if you
Josh
want-
Matthews, noted heavy hitter.
I literally wrote in my notes, Josh Matthews, like, look, if you think that I'm going to remember Josh Daniels more than I have to, you got another thing coming, my friend.
Well, apparently
So,
I don't
anyway,
think that. So
he thinks if there's another Field of Honor tournament, Josh Daniels could be the future winner. I almost like went when I watched this. Like, it's cute that you think that's possible, and on a variety of levels. Stryker says he's going to be the Pure champion and be known as the man who put Pure Wrestling back on the map. I just wrote in all capitals in my notes, "What is Pure Wrestling?" ? Exclamation mark. Like, this is something that I guess we can talk about later, but Gabe continues to hype up during the show over and over again that pure wrestling is not technical wrestling. It just means competition at its purest. We'll explore this later. I got some quotes from Gabe interviews with the media. I'll just say I don't think you get an answer by the end of the show. And that
spoilers, you never get an answer.
It's a long-term story.
Still ongoing.
To the final first round match in the Pure title tournament, AJ Styles defeats Jimmy Rave via pinfall in 7 minutes 35 seconds with a discus lariat. This was the one first round match that really kind of had some a prior issue between these the two guys that were wrestling, because we had seen for months as AJ had been basically Jimmy Rave's mentor, kind of a hard ass on him and just pushing him and berating him until Jimmy finally kind of snapped on a recent show and was like, come on, asshole, quit being a jerk to me. And in fact, the Ring of Honor website at the time building up this match says AJ Styles requested that Ring of Honor officials give him Jimmy Rave as a first round opponent in the tournament. Ring of Honor officials have granted that request. Styles, considered the favorite to win it all, has stated that he's going to teach Rave some lessons and give him a beating. I thought it was kind of interesting, too, that the Ring of Honor website, in that quote, said AJ was the favorite and then booked him to win. That's usually not what a company would do, so it's kind of interesting they kind of hid the result in plain sight there. Matt, what did you think about this as a wrestling match?
It's interesting, because in some ways this was my least favorite match of the first round. I thought there was some sloppiness and, I wouldn't say lack of chemistry, because obviously these guys had some chemistry, but there was just something off about some of it. But on the other hand, I thought it accomplished a lot storyline-wise. They were building up for a long time, Rave needing that killer instinct. So he was kept trying to fire Rave up, and Rave, did some big moves and stuff. But he kept getting his offense cut off until, AJ hurt his knee. Right, and then AJ was like, the ref was checking on him, and then Rave backed off, and AJ told him to attack the knee, so Rave attacked it. And I thought that was a good culminating storyline of trying to get Rave that killer instinct, and leading to AJ winning with the discus lariat. And after the match, he was like, "Don't apologize, this is good." So I thought the story ideas was good. It wasn't quite long enough to develop it too much, but it also played into a show-long storyline involving AJ's knee or his leg. So I don't know. My opinions on the match are kind of mixed. I thought they did some stuff well. I thought some stuff didn't go so well. So my feelings of the match was, I guess, on the Trevor scale, average.
See, I thought this was above average. This might have been my favorite of the three short matches in the first round. I wouldn't put it above not Josh Daniels. Now Josh Daniels is popping into my head. No, I wouldn't put it above CM Punk and John Walters, but it was limited by how short it was. This was the shortest match of the first round, but I felt like AJ Styles and Jimmy Rave had some fairly good chemistry together, and obviously they had worked together before in places like NWA Wildside. There was, at times, a little bit of roughness, but I also just feel like AJ has, especially tonight, he has some real snap and real crispness and a lot of weight to his offense, even some of his acrobatic stuff. And I feel like Jimmy Rave is, at this point, just such a handsome, literal baby-faced young man that it really, it gels well together to see, hard-ass AJ Styles kind of hitting little Jimmy Rave hard. The one thing I didn't like about Jimmy Rave's performance is I felt like this is a match where I really noticed that Jimmy Rave at this point in his career really needed to work on his like emoting, because AJ Styles is bringing like a lot of emotion, like you were saying, Matt, challenging Rave and being like, come on, hit my injury. And he's really kind of wrestling this like he has a chip on his shoulder. And if you look at Jimmy Rave's facial expressions, he's really not bringing much to the table in a match where he really should be like pushing right back against that. And I guess the one other thing I didn't like, other than the short length, was AJ does hurt his knee, which will become a show-long storyline, but he hurts it doing just a move that he does all the time, which is the kind of the springboard, off the ropes, moonsault into where he lands in a reverse DDT position on his opponent. And I felt like since AJ was going to have his knee hurt for this tournament, why not have Jimmy Rave actually be the guy that hurts it, to at least give Jimmy Rave something? And instead, the fact that like AJ got hurt through no fault of Jimmy Rave, like it was literally just a move AJ normally did gone wrong. I felt like, come on, you could have let Jimmy be the guy that hurt it somehow through a move. But
I'll defend that one actually, because I think the idea is, will Rave take advantage of an opportunity? Even if that wasn't his goal. And I think that was the thing that AJ was trying to bring out. Like, hey, like you have this chance here. Like, there's a weakness. Use it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I can see your point too. I kind of, maybe I'm just defensive because I feel like Jimmy Rave has been given so little from Ring of Honor at this point in his career. Mm-hmm. Like even this match, it's the one match that actually has a story behind it, and it gets the least amount of time of anything, which I felt was kind of like par for the course for Jimmy at this point in his Ring of Honor career. But no, you're right. They were definitely going in a story. The other thing I mentioned before I throw it to you, Joe, is I think the Pro Wrestling Torch maybe got it wrong here, because there's a quote from the Pro Wrestling Torch when they covered the show that said AJ Styles also came out of this event with a pain in his knee, and I feel like that's suggesting they thought this was a real legit injury. Maybe it was, but I really, considering how much attention was paid to it throughout the show, I really have a hard time believing this was a legit injury.
Yeah, me too.
No, that's such a common trope in tournaments. Like, someone's suffered an injury or took a bad beating and has to keep coming back. I can't imagine.
Yeah, and the whole tournament was kind of built around that story. But, Joe, what did you think about the match? Where are you on the Matt to Trevor sliding scale?
I'm closer to Trevor. I like this a lot. I like when they said Rave was a 500 to 1 underdog, and I was like, God damn, I put $10 on that. Like Buster Douglas was like 42 to 1. So, but he did lose in the end. So I guess Vegas had that right. I liked AJ's offense was very crisp. A lot of big offensive moves in this. I like the storyline and Rave taking advantage of it. And I really like the fact that AJ just kind of hit this kill shot, not quite out of nowhere, but he didn't. He was in trouble and he managed to win by hitting this one big clothesline. I appreciated that. And I did like in the promo afterwards, after Rave apologizes 50 times, AJ tells him, don't apologize. And then Rave apologizes again immediately. I'm like, dummy, he just told you not to apologize.
He was apologizing for apologizing. This is a move that I've done many times. Trevor, you're Canadian. You know it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I always lust after the famed triple apology where I apologize for apologizing too much, which is a thing I have literally done in relationships with people.
Oh my God, me too. Come on. We're very similar.
Yes.
The other thing I was going to note about the match is this crowd really hated Jimmy Rave, and he even gotten the die treatment from the guy who did the same thing to CM Punk at Main Event Spectacles. Only it wasn't in Jimmy's face this time, but I saw him like in the corner of the screen just going die at Jimmy Rave. He really earned that.
Poor Jimmy. Odds makers don't love him. Gabe doesn't love him at this point. Well, but Jimmy will get his time to shine.
Yeah, I mean,
down the road.
It allowed him to have a explanation for his heel turn. It was a very like Rocky Maivia situation.
Yeah, exactly. Right now he's building all the legit justification he needs to turn on everybody.
Yep.
So, as Joe mentioned, and I think Matt mentioned too, after the match we get a segment where AJ keeps selling his knee in the ring. Gabe wonders what will happen when he faces Matt Striker, especially since Striker just submitted Josh Daniels with the Striker lock that works on the leg. Doug calls this match a moral victory for Rave, even though he lost in 7 minutes and didn't even hurt AJ's knee himself. The camera follows AJ and Rave as they make their way back to the curtain. Rave apologizes, as was already mentioned. AJ tells him not to apologize. Blah, blah, blah. He'd do the same thing. And yeah, so that's the end of that the AJ and Jimmy Rave storyline will continue down the road. But we go back in front of the crowd where the team of Scott Clark and Jerk Jackson make their way to the ring. Jerk Jackson, better known to probably most people listening to this as Bobby Fish, making his Ring of Honor on-screen debut.
He was beefy.
Yes.
Yeah, he's trimmed down a lot.
Yeah.
Looked very different to me.
Yep.
So they make their way to the ring, followed by their opponents, Dunn and Marcos, the Ring Crew Express. Dunn and Marcos high-five the ref, as well as Doug, who's shooting video at ringside, which I always laugh at. Before they wrestle, the Outcast Killers come to the ring. Oman Tortuga gets on the mic and he calls the crowd losers. He criticizes all the fans for being there on Valentine's Day to stare at guys, except for the women, who he says were dragged there by said guys. And he says the women can join the girls that are already waiting in his hotel room, which he believes waiting for something which I believe he called Saint Happy Oman's Day, which was one of the worst St. Valentine's Day puns I have ever heard.
I also love any promo where the shtick is, if you were really cool, you would not be watching this.
Yeah, it's like, we came to watch wrestling. That's what you do. That's your job. Like, well,
it's Gabe's always
baffling logic, but I don't know.
Yeah, like poor Gabe's always selling this as like, you have to experience this live. This is the hippest product ever. And then out comes the guy's like, why are all you losers here on Valentine's Day? Like all these women don't want to be here. It's like I realize he's being a heel, but it's the exact opposite message they're normally trying to sell. And Oman turns his attention to Dunn and Marcos, and I like at this point during Oman's promo, the camera basically shows in the background that Clark and Jackson have basically given up on a match and are walking to the back. Like, they're just like, we're probably not going to wrestle tonight. Like, they just give up. Yeah.
I actually find this the most noteworthy thing about this whole segment. Like, why didn't they let the Ring Crew Express just have a squash? Like, why did they have to do this instead? Why not do both?
And I don't know, like, this is like a common thing for Ring of Honor, but the idea that these guys, they were probably just in the area or helping out, but that this was their entire role on the show tonight, was to come out and be like a false tease, and then to basically, like, they aren't even attacked, or like the Outcast Killers haven't even attacked Dunn and Marcos yet. They're just like, oh, this promo's going on too long. I guess we'll go home.
Yeah, they were just mean. So they left.
So Oman says the Killers are bigger, better wrestlers, and better looking than Dunn and Marcos. Dunn and Marcos get a big chant. Marcos grabs the mic, says they're not going to take it anymore, blah, blah, blah. The Killers attack. They lay out Dunn and Marcos. The bell is rung, so I guess this is a weirdly official match. The Ring Crew Express make a big comeback as We're Not Going to Take It plays over the PA. Killers retreat. Dunn gets back on the mic, says this is another sellout on the We're Not Going to Take It World Tour. And wasn't much of a segment, but as always, the crowd loves Dunn and Marcos, as they should.
Yeah, I do agree that the Outcast Killers are better looking than Dunn and Marcos, but that's as far as my agreement goes.
I don't know. Dunn and Marcos are pretty. Maybe they're not as handsome, but they're cuter, I would say, Matt. They're cuter. Joe,
Right.
What do you think about their looks?
Fair enough.
Oh, boy. Let's rank the hunks of Ring of Honor.
If anyone's ranking the hunks of Ring of Honor, I'm guessing neither of these teams even make it into the conversation.
Oh,
They would not make the top five.
No.
Whatever. I'm kind of stunned this wasn't a post-intermission segment. I kind of have a feeling the show got shuffled around. I've never heard anything to the contrary. But I have a theory as to why that is. I'll get into in a little bit with another match.
Not to jump on you, but my only guess would be, if you look at the way the tournament is structured, after the second round, we get 2 non-tournament matches as a buffer for the finals. So I can only assume here, we only get 1 match as a buffer between the first and second round. So maybe they thought, we just need 1 more segment just to give the guys a little bit more time to rest. I don't know. That's a very flimsy reason I just pulled out of thin air, but that's the only thing I can think of for structuring the show like this. But
I'll save my thoughts until after I hear Joe's theory that he's making us wait for.
Okay. We are definitely building this up too much.
Yep.
But next we join Jim Cornette sitting somewhere in Louisville. Cornette says since the Briscoes are doing so well now, he can just sit in Louisville and make phone calls to advise the Briscoes. Jim says he'll be around just enough to guide the Briscoes to the top. He says he wouldn't give the Backseat Boys 5-1 odds that they'll even show up tonight. So this Ring of Honor show, very concerned with odds so far. Cornette turns his attention to Samoa Joe, or as he just calls him, Samoa, and he makes a couple more hacky comments about him being a Samoan savage before he reveals that due to his negotiations, the upcoming Jay Briscoe-Samoa Joe cage match on a future show can end not just by pinfall or submission, but escaping the cage as well. So I guess like the implication is that gives Jay a big advantage because Joe is so, heavy. It's going to be harder for him to climb a cage. So just a little bit of housekeeping to set up the next show.
Yeah, I thought, besides the, the racist tropes, I thought it was a perfectly good promo. It got its point across, and I think it's a good point to get across, so all good.
Yeah,
except for the racism, that part's bad.
We say that a lot on these shows, except for the sexism or racism. Not bad.
Yep.
And that brings us to the country whipping 6-man
no,
tag.
I got to correct you. An old-fashioned country whipping match per the graphic.
The old-fashioned, not one of these newfangled country whipping.
No, they have. If you have microchips in the straps to tell you how hard you hit, that's a newfangled one. But this was old-fashioned. It said.
So quick, I know none of us are like necessarily Memphis connoisseurs, but name for me another country whipping match. I can't.
Strap. That's the thing I thought was really interesting about this. Where I've seen a lot of strap matches, I can't remember a country whipping match.
I mean, maybe like all the Memphis in Southern wrestling aficionados will think that we're idiots for not being able to name any, but I can't name any.
And Joe, I was definitely going to say I believe AEW is going to put the microchip in the strap for matches because that's the kind of stat tracking Tony Khan's a big fan. So,
the amounts of whips each strap is responsible for.
Yeah, like percentage of welts in relation to percentage of strap strikes thrown. HC Loke has got an 87% welt ratio. This is off the charts, Excalibur. I can't believe it. So anyway, in this old-fashioned country whipping match, the Special K of Dixie, Hydro, and Izzy defeated the Carnage crew of DeVito, Just Incredible, and Loke in 8 minutes, 46 seconds when Izzy pinned Loke after Hydro spike pile drove him through a table on the outside. Joe, definitely something completely different on the show. There was no other match like this. What did you think about it?
Far more of a spectacle than an actual match, and I'm glad you mentioned who specifically was in the match because it was just like pretty much all of Special K versus the Carnage crew. Just kind of nonstop, carnage, as they say. Tons of blood. Like I think Dixie in particular was just a complete mess. A lot of whipping. A lot of old-fashioned country whipping. And at the end, this is somewhat funny that I guess DeVito's daughter appeared with one member of Special K, causing who was it, DeVito and Just Incredible to run off. When I saw this live, I had no view of the entranceway, so I had no idea what was happening. Like to me, DeVito and Incredible just ran away for some reason. I was like, that's very odd, and they got the win. But the whole. It's so funny the whole daughter thing because clearly Special K and the Carnage crew are characters that would naturally be at odds with each other. So I don't know why you would have to introduce this element to it. It's not something I think a lot of people in the crowd could relate to, like their teenage daughter, falling in with ravers.
Yeah, we've all experienced it.
We've all been there.
Actually, I should bring up. I guess I should have elaborated on this when I talked about just the result of the match, but. The finish of the match is actually really... First, it's the Carnage crew have Special K right where they want them. They're going to do the big spike pile driver. And then Angel Dust shows up at the entrance with a girl that they end up basically telling you later it's Loke's daughter. And Just Incredible and DeVito just immediately drop everything and run away and leave poor Loke to get... 800-on-1 attacked by all of Special K and loses the match. But going to what you said about the raving stuff, this is maybe my line of the night on commentary. Gabe says when the whole angle happens with the daughter, DeVito's daughter has joined the raving lifestyle, and I just thought that's like the most fatherly. Like I don't think Gabe was even a father yet, but that's like, goddamn kids joining the raving lifestyle. Like it's the most hack. It was just so funny and adorable.
Also, like another line that I thought was great was they were just like, "Who is that girl?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, fucking figure it out, geniuses!" Like what? Who?
Oh, my favorite line in the match was when they said, "Oh, Dixie, he'll probably use his parents' health insurance."
Yeah. I love that too.
Good.
Yeah, see, Trevor's Canadian, so he doesn't get that. Like,
understand our.
Yeah.
I actually wrote that down. I hadn't got to that, but yeah, like only in America is using your parents' health insurance to like get needed medical treatment a heel move.
Yes. It's so good. We should be showing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez this match.
Yeah, this match.
So she knows what needs to change in the world of wrestling.
It's like, these spoiled trust fund kids, they use their parents' health insurance to get stitches. Like, it's just like the most ridiculous. And
also, when I was the age that Izzy was here, which is probably like 20, 21, I was also still on my parents' health insurance. It's pretty much the norm.
Yeah, I was too. This is not a shocking turn of events.
Yeah.
This is not some abuse of opulence or anything like that.
I mean, when Obama, not to get too political, but when Obama was
do it.
When Obama was promoting Obamacare, one of his big selling points was like, look, if you're a kid, you can keep your parents' health insurance till like your mid-20s. Like that was like the thing that he knew would test well with crowds. Like, not a heel thing.
Yeah, because before Obamacare, we had to get off when you were like 22, 23, and then they changed it to 26 with Obamacare.
Yeah, I mean, people like health insurance. They also like not having to get their own health insurance. So it would be a baby face move if someone just came out and was like, everyone in the crowd gets to keep their parents' health insurance, they'd be like the biggest baby face of the night in a wrestling company.
Trevor, stop trying to destroy my freedom.
I'm sorry, Matt. Instead, I'm just going to ask you, what did you think about this as a match and not as a very hilarious political statement?
I liked it much more as the latter. Yeah, it was a spectacle. It was mostly an angle. I guess that's what I would say. It was barely a match. There's just like a lot of chaos, a lot of whipping, old-fashioned country whipping, like Joe said. There was a lot of bleeding. Basically, I'm just going to repeat everything Joe said because there's really nothing more to say. The angle is extra weird to me because didn't they establish early on that DeVito's daughter is supposed to be like 12?
Yep.
So shouldn't there be all kinds of police out there trying to stop all these guys from kidnapping this 12-year-old girl? I thought it was so funny. They were like, that girl, she couldn't be. No, it couldn't be. And it's like, obviously it is. That's exactly who it is. Who else would it be? Why else would DeVito run? Do you think DeVito and Chris Incredible we like that girl too. Come back here. It doesn't make any sense. But I guess if you're trying to get heat and build to a big blow-off match at the next show, I guess even though it's really funny, it's probably not a bad angle, if I'm being honest. I think it's just the concept is stupid, but it was probably not so badly done. I don't know. I mean,
I give credit to Gabe. They are trying to give these two teams a reason to feud that's personal, that's more than just so-and-so doesn't like ravers. They're actually trying to give the Carnage crew something to sink their teeth into, a real personal reason.
Yeah.
But the implications of some of the things they've suggested, we can go into it, I think, a bit more later when we talk about a Special K promo. It's kind of, especially in light of what's about to go down in Ring of Honor, it's definitely eyebrow-raising.
Also, how do you ever take these characters seriously, the heels, ever again, when you're basically saying that Angel Dust is a child molester, and all of the other Special K members are aiding and abetting child molestation, and then when you add in the layer of the whole Feinstein scandal on top of that, it just becomes that much creepier. I don't know. It's just too much.
I was gonna say I thought Angel Dust had the easy night, but not getting old-fashioned country whipped and all, but I guess with the stigma he now has upon him, maybe he drew the short straw.
Yeah, and then the other thing is when they pile drove Loke through the table, Gabe was like, "This is what the Carnage Crew did to Becky in Boston," and then I'm just thinking like, yeah, and you loved it when they did that to Becky, and now this is like a fully grown man who's like a tough guy brawler getting it done to him, and you're much more appalled now.
I thought that was more maybe just Gabe. Like, Gabe loves, and I appreciate this, he likes to point out when, like, his booking is referencing his older booking.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same with the fact this is a country whipping match, just because Special K strapped the Carnage Crew during a segment a few shows ago. So even though you would think Special K doesn't seem like a strap match kind of group of wrestlers, you know, they did try again. When Gabe at his best, he tries to dot his I's so everything does have a bit more of a reason for it to exist.
Yeah.
As a match, at first, the first few minutes, I kind of got flashbacks to some of the early Ring of Honor hardcore matches I really didn't like, where it's just 800 people brawling at ringside, 100 people are bleeding about a minute in, and you don't know why, and the camera is having trouble keeping up with the action, and it's kind of plodding. But then once it got in the ring and it got more move-oriented and it just became more about the Special K taking crazy bumps, I thought it got more enjoyable up to like something where it's not something I'd ever want to watch again, but I did not dislike it like I was worried I was going to after the first minute or two. There were a couple brutal moments in this match. Izzy takes a really brutal Loke chair shot right to the head. Angel Dust takes a swinging neck breaker on an open chair. And then, actually, ironically, Loke might have taken the worst bump because Izzy overshoots a Phoenix Splash, and it looks like he catches Loke right in the face with his foot. The ref has a conversation with Loke right after. It looked like something I would not want to. I would not want to take it like that. And I guess the other thing to mention is Dixie. Of all the guys who bled in this match, and there were a bunch of them, Dixie had a really bad cut. Not quite Dustin Rhodes at Double or Nothing, but very bad. And I like this little note from the Pro Wrestling Torch when they were writing about this show. They wrote, Special K member Dixie suffered a deep cut on his forehead, which was super glued shut rather than having stitches. And then Wade wrote in parentheses, which is a common and relatively safe practice used to close cuts. So I like that Wade was like trying to teach us a little bit about also, I just like the words relatively safe practice. So I thought that was amusing. And he would not be the only person having to deal with a brutal cut tonight. So
I just want to add, just incredible, Mr. Tombstone. They did a quick camera cut, but he missed it by like a good foot. Like the guy's head didn't come anywhere near the canvas, which I still remember just seeing that spot. And not that I want guys dunked on their noggins, but he's been doing that move for quite a while. You'd think he'd have it down by then, but...
And it is
he's not used to doing it on guys quite so short.
After the match, a bunch of refs and for some reason Dunn and Marcos rush in to check on Loke.
Because you know why? It's because they're all like part of the ring crew, and it's like it's that ring crew solidarity. Because isn't Loke like the leader of the ring crew? Isn't that what Shane Hagedorn has said?
I think so, and also I think he was basically like an unofficial like agent. Backstage agent even for the company at this point. So we cut to Special K celebrating backstage. I believe this is what I was talking about before. A bloody Dixie is fake laughing up a storm. Everyone's celebrating. Dixie says that another member of Special K, I think he was saying Angel Dust, I couldn't quite make it out, is taking care of another DeVito, unquote. And this is what when I was noting in my notes, what Matt mentioned a little minutes ago, that in another promo, I actually went back in my notes for that show and checked just to confirm, DeVito said that his daughter at Final Battle 2003 was 13 years old.
Oy.
And now Special K is joking about Angel Dust having sex with her. And it's been like 3 months later. So, yeah.
LOL, I thought that promo said 18.
Yeah. So, like, it's crazy that, like, no one even acts like this is anything at all. Like, it's just offhanded. Like, yeah, he's getting DeVito's daughter, and
he's corrupting her by bringing her to raves. Not that he's like committing horrible assault and rape against her. Like that's seems like I don't know. They're not shockingly they're not sensitive with these issues. I know it's weird, but it's shockingly true.
We then join Gary Michael Capetta in the ring. He's really not dressed up for the second anniversary show at all. He's just wearing his usual sweater. He's not wearing a suit like Samoa Joe style. But I still love you, Gary. And Capetta says, "You know me as the guy who tries to get scoops." And this made me laugh so hard. One single fan, upon hearing this in the crowd, excitedly screams, "Scoops!" at the top of his lungs. There's just one fan super excited about scoops.
I think he was hoping that Al Isaacs was going to come out.
Yokozuna's going to join the NWO Scoops.com.
The Heart Foundation.
Heart Foundation he was going to join. I'll have
Oh,
you know.
yeah, the Heart Foundation.
Which we heard about every day for like about a year.
Gary wants to know where Homicide is, and he calls out Julius Smokes for answers, describing Smokes as one of his favorite guys, continuing the great run of Gary Michael Capetta, Julius Smokes buddy comedy. There's a surprisingly big reaction for Julius Smokes to come out for an interview. And you can hear Doug saying, like, laughing a couple times behind the camera as he videotapes Smoke's gyrations. And I love anytime you can hear Doug, like, behind the hard camera not being able to stifle laughter at something.
This also this confirms something that I thought a long time ago. That song that he came out to was like in the background of one ROH DVD a long time ago. It might have been Night of the Butcher, and I was like, I think that's Julius Smoke singing. So the fact that he came out to this music now confirms for me that it was. So I'm happy that is confirmed.
Huh, that's interesting. I did not notice that. Smokes gets on the mic and he sings, but he's so loud it blows out the sound system and I can't make out the lyrics to what he's singing. Smokes says...
Oh, yeah. That was one of the things.
Smokes then says he doesn't know where Homicide is. Homicide won't even return his phone calls. And then he says something I can't make out that Doug laughs at. Smokes reminds us that Homicide has beaten BJ Whitmer, Samoa Joe, and CM Punk, and he begs Homicide to call him. Smokes switches gears then. He says the Rottweilers have a new member, but he can't tell us yet.
But then he will tell you later.
Yeah, so Smokes is just one of a kind.
I'm glad that everyone is acting as confused by that Homicide promo at the end as we were. Although at the time it seemed like Smokes was not confused at all and was fully on board with what Homicide was saying. But now they're acting like Smokes is kept in the dark too.
Mike Johnson, for whatever this is worth, wrote in the PW Insider at the time that he believes Homicide had a personal commitment today, which is why he missed the show. So doesn't say what the personal commitment would be, but something very important if you listen to that last Homicide promo, because he doesn't know when he's coming back, but he's coming back. He's coming back soon. He's right behind you. We go to the semifinals in the Ring of Honor Pure Title Tournament. The first semifinal match, CM Punk defeats Doug Williams via pinfall in 10 minutes, 44 seconds, when he was able to raise his shoulder during a double pin situation. What happens is Doug Williams hits CM Punk with a Chaos Theory German suplex, the second actually of the match, and his knee was injured earlier. His knee gives out, so his shoulders slump, stay to the mat. Punk raises his at the last second, so Punk gets the win, even though he takes the move. Matt, pretty, big first-time match, at least for Ring of Honor, CM Punk versus Doug Williams. It only got 10 minutes. What did you think?
I loved the first 5 minutes, and I wasn't as into the second half. I just thought, it felt off. But the early part of the match, I love. Like, my favorite part of the whole match was the beginning. Where Williams basically starts the match. Like, the bell rings, and Williams just runs at Punk, jumps on him, and, clamps on him with his, legs on this, torso vice. And I've never seen a match start that way. And it's the best opening to a match ever. And if I was ever a wrestler, I would start, at least 10% of my matches that way. But I like, there were some really cute spots early. All the stuff relating to Williams's offense, I thought was great. Williams does this thing where he's in a headlock and he does this reversal where he uses his legs to push out into his own headlock, and then Punk tried to do the same thing, but he failed at it, and I thought it's so Williams is the master of this, and Punk doesn't know how to do it right. I really like that sort of stuff. I thought Punk looked really athletic here, which is not something I normally say about him. But I don't know. There was just it kind of just slowed down after a while. Punk's selling didn't go on for very long. He worked over Williams' knee after Williams missed the knee drop. And then the chaos, they did the chaos theory, but Williams, his knee gave out on the bridge, and then Punk lifted his shoulder, which I'm never a big fan of those finishes. I thought this was overall a good match, but it was really the first part of the match that really captured my interest.
I thought this was a good match too, but it goes back to what I said during the first Doug Williams match on the show, which is I feel like if CM Punk and Doug Williams were wrestling each other and they just had like 20 minutes and didn't have to worry about wrestling before or after this, we would have gotten a significantly better match. But what we got, I think, was still good. And I agree, like Doug Williams, it's just so fun when he kind of plays almost like sometimes what Zack Sabre Jr. does. He doesn't do all the same kind of mat work things, but it's that idea of this guy is just so good at this one element of wrestling. He's got so many little tricks. And if you try and play in his world, like Punk did in that one spot you described, like Doug Williams is just going to clown you. Like, do not try and out Doug Williams. And yeah, I thought it was a fun match. They really saved all the leg story for the very end, where, Doug misses that big bomb scare where he does the falling knee off the top rope, and just immediately Punk seizes on it. He puts Williams in the tree of woe and then chops his knee, which I thought was kind of goofy because, like, I know he's trying to hurt his knee, and in a way, part of me is like, that's cool, but part of me feels like if I hit your hard knee with the back of my hand as hard as I could, I feel like I'd hurt my hand more than I'd hurt your knee. Like, I feel like your knee would win out in that battle.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on, like, the power of the hand, but yeah, I can imagine that the knee would get more damage.
And then Punk does a face wash to Williams' knee, and the announcing actually calls it a knee wash, which for some reason just made me chuckle. And the one thing I kind of didn't like about the match, other than the fact that it's only 10 minutes and then we're probably holding it back a little bit, is that Punk takes 2 Chaos Theory Germans in this match, and because he raises his arm on the second one, he survives both of them, which I think is a bit of overkill. Like, knowing that the last one was going to play into the finish and Punk was going to be able to raise his shoulder, I don't know if I'd have him survive a first one of that. I don't think he needed to. And it was kind of interesting the way they even did it, where Punk almost over-rotated, and I don't know if Williams lost his grip or something, and like Punk almost fell on his head out of the first one, which was a little scary. But yeah, I thought it was a good match, but again, not what it maybe could have been in a different circumstance. Joe, what did you think?
Yeah, I thought this was good. Doug Williams is just a joy to watch perform. It was almost comedic at times, or at least comedy elements here, like the part where Punk had a headlock and Williams wriggled out, but Punk still had his arms in the headlock position. Like, that's a loose headlock, but you need to tighten that up. But the leg stuff at the end was a little jammed in, but it did play into the finish, so I appreciate that. And Punk wins, but, again, kind of sneaks one out there going into the finals. So, no, this was all good. I don't think they ever met again. I'm blanking if they ever did. I'm sure they had a better match in them, but this was good for what it was.
One highlight for me, though, is after the match, Punk is on the outside, and even though he won, he like kicks a barricade out of frustration. I don't know why, but what's great is it clearly startles a fan for legitimately that he did not expect his barricade to be kicked, and Punk seems genuinely like tickled pink by this. Like, he starts laughing. He's like, "I scared the shit out of you," and he's just like talking to him and chuckling, and he seems genuinely happy that he scared this guy for real. So.
Oh, as he was coming out, too, he's like, next fan that touches me, I'm going to knock him out. And it's like, well, given your MMA record, I don't know. I might put 500 to 1 odds on that.
And Punk was getting really good heel heat tonight. Some nights he doesn't. This was a night where he was really well received as a heel. Lots of fans, not everybody, but a lot of fans really liked booing him tonight. We cut to who knows where for a Steve Corino mail-in promo. Steve talks about how time flies, and just 2 years ago he was with Eric Gargiulo, he jokes, recording commentary for these innovative shows. And Steve says, that was the times of our lives. Not really, he goes. Carino brings up a bunch of things that happened to him in Ring of Honor, including the riot, being stabbed in the eye with a fork by Homicide, losing his hearing in one ear, getting a bunch of scars like a baby, wrestling in barbed wire, and losing to Josh Daniels, who he calls one of my own kids, all thanks to Homicide. Carino says 2004 is going to bring nothing when it comes to Steve Carino and Ring of Honor working together. He shits on the Pure Wrestling title. He shits on Samoa Joe. He says CM Punk is his hero, though, and that's a shoot, Carino says. And he idolizes him even though he's younger than Steve. Steve says Punk is the only reason Ring of Honor stays in business, and they better thank him for that. So they're planting some seeds. I don't know. I mean, I know when Steve comes back, he does team up with the Second City Saints, but I don't know if they ever really go anywhere big with this. And maybe the Feinstein stuff kind of throws a monkey wrench in some of those plans. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's always like, for whatever reason, a little bit of a peeve of mine when wrestlers are like, "That's a shoot," because can't they just say that's the truth? Like you can't just use normal words because you're in wrestling. You just have to say things are shoots or works. They can't say that's a lie or that's the truth. It would just sound much more believable and normal if you said that. Oh yeah, CM Punk is my hero, and I really mean that. Couldn't you just say that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw that from Steve a couple times during the Homicide feud, where this need to be no, I really hate this guy. This isn't like everything else. This is a shoot, where you really don't need to do that, and it kind of makes everything else you say look bad when you're well, this one thing is real.
Yeah, and even just the verbiage. If you want to say something's real, just say it's real. You don't have to use the wrestling lingo. I don't know. It just sounds corny to me. Maybe I'm just picky. I don't know.
I mean, it sounds like something you would see on a Vince. Sounds like something you would hear on a Vince Russo era Nitro or something, which is not what you want to be going for, and definitely not what Ring of Honor was aiming to be. So, but moving on, we go to Ring of Honor, the second semifinal match in the Pure Wrestling Title Tournament. AJ Styles defeats Matt Striker via pinfall in 20 minutes 46 seconds after he hits a springboard 450 splash. I thought this was kind of a weird match. For the first 8 or 9 minutes, AJ barely sells his knee injury from the prior match, even though during that match they were treating it like a big deal. And if you listen to the commentary, it almost sounds like they're surprised rewatching this match on tape, and they're trying to make excuses, because at first they talk about the knee injury, and then they start saying stuff like, well, it doesn't seem as bad as we thought it was, and maybe, he did have an hour to rest, and he did get medical attention in the back, and maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought. And so I would say for the first half of the match, they really do not. Stryker doesn't go after AJ's knee at all. They just work a regular wrestling match. And then all of a sudden, after one move, they act like AJ is feeling his knee again. And from there, Stryker just completely changes his focus. He's all over the leg. And they go back and forth with stuff like that. And overall, I thought this match was it was a good match. I feel like this was maybe the most intense Matt Striker was. He's outright almost healing at some points in this match, where he's raking AJ's eyes a couple times, and he's being he's got some swagger to him in this match, which I appreciated, and I felt like that really contrasted well with AJ's kind of stiffness, and sometimes AJ can be a little bit grumpy in his wrestling style, so I thought that went well back and forth. I feel like the leg stuff, it never really had a huge payoff to me. AJ did sell his leg, but he also did a lot of stuff that would involve a lot of leg strength. And it just never really had a satisfying payoff to me, particularly because even when Stryker did have AJ in a couple leg submissions, the camera had the camera angle they used was of Stryker and AJ's back, so you couldn't see their facial expressions. And I also feel like Matt Striker kind of has this bad habit of not really working a hold. He just kind of grabs a limb a lot of the time and just holds it at an angle. And it's well, this is a submission. And it's not really that engaging. But I thought the match was good. I think the problem for Matt Striker is it's a good match, but he got 20 minutes against AJ Styles. This was a point in his career where he really needed to hit a home run, and this was a chance to. And it was just good. It was just a solid 3.25 star match, 3.5 maybe if you're being generous. But it on its own it was good. It's just when I look back and go, why didn't Matt Striker's push take off? I feel it's opportunities like this where if this match had become one of those, oh, this is a match of the year contender, you have to buy the tape for this. this might have been like a key point in his career, but it's just good. It's just okay. Joe, what did you think?
Yeah, it was. I felt like they wanted to give AJ a much longer match than Punk had in the same round, so he'd be a little more worn down going into the finals. But like you said, like you would think with Stryker getting the win almost automatically with the Stryker lock in round one, AJ tweaking his leg, that's something they would go right to, and they didn't. And I don't know if they thought, well, we can't do 20 minutes of work in the leg, we'll just kind of pad it out. Because at one point, he has like a double arm submission on, and it's like, do your work on the leg. Like, like do something. Like AJ was still, kind of running around at points. He won with a 450 springboard 450. So, and there was also kind of this weird, like, Stryker started almost like cheating or playing dirty at one point. He went to an eye poke, and they're like, that was like kind of another facet tossed in. The whole match never really worked in the end completely. There was just kind of a little too much going on. Still, some very good points. Still, probably pretty good, but yeah, kind of not a home run.
Matt, what did you think?
Yeah, I liked the match a lot, except like in terms of like Stryker, like you said, like having that swagger and like being more vicious, and I appreciated that until like you got toward the end where like you had AJ at moments selling the leg really well, and then it became so spotty. And just like you said, like the fact that he won with a springboard like 450 splash, like in this match, like the match where you're supposed to be really worried about his leg. Just like you couldn't have done another finish in this match. You couldn't have done the discus lariat or like a million other things to that he could have, the Styles Clash, something that didn't involve him doing a flip off of his legs. I don't like. It just seemed like they just weren't thinking, and I thought that took the match down a lot for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess to be fair to Matt Stryker going after AJ's eyes, AJ did rake his brow early on, his unibrow.
Oh, that's right.
AJ got a big AJ chant and a holy shit chant for raking Matt Stryker's brow.
That is a good point.
There was there were some weird parts of this also, like Gabe on commentary at one point acted like Stryker slamming AJ's injured knee onto the ring apron was like a heel move. He said something like, I have to question his tactics doing this, and it's like, this is actually great tactics. He's going after an injury, which is in fact what AJ Styles just told his last opponent to do. So there's also one kind of spotty moment where Matt Stryker tries a ring post figure 4, and he literally just can't do it, and he gives up immediately.
He just kind of lays down on the floor.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you'd think you'd practice that before they actually did it, like in front of an audience. But hey,
I'm sure it was fine.
Also, for anyone watching, again, I don't want to say, like, it's not, in my mind, it's not a bad match. Like, it's entertaining the whole way through, but it feels kind of like it's less than the sum of its parts. Like, the leg stuff doesn't really have a satisfying payoff, and you think on paper, with these two getting 20 minutes, you're going to see something really good, and it just underwhelms a bit while still being good. But if you're watching this, look, there is one really good bump. I think that's worth watching this for, where AJ charges at Matt Stryker, who's standing in the corner, and Stryker just kind of like back body drops AJ over the top rope, and AJ kind of takes the bump where he's holding onto the ropes, and kind of, you think to yourself, oh, I've seen this a million times. He's he's grabbing the ropes with his hands, and so he's going to land on the ring apron feet first, and instead he doesn't touch the ring apron at all, and just takes a bump straight over the top rope direct to the floor. And I just thought, it is amazing that AJ Styles did not get hurt more in his career, like, because he would do stuff like that, and where most wrestlers would take this. I mean, I'm sure he found a way to do it as safely as possible, but most wrestlers would just have landed on the apron, and he did not. So watch for that if you're watching the match. After the match, Gabe says there might not even be a final now with how badly AJ's knee is hurt. He mentions how well CM Punk just worked over Doug Williams' injured leg in their match, so definitely building that story throughout the tournament. But then I think that sells another point to me, which I get throughout this tournament as well, which is Gabe sells the severity of AJ's knee way more serious than AJ Styles sells the knee injury. Like, Gabe keeps selling it like, oh, his knee's all shredded, he might not be able to do one of these matches. And the best I can describe it is AJ sells this injury throughout the tournament as like it's a mild to slightly moderate hindrance, where Gabe is selling it like this is something that could stop him from wrestling. And the selling does not match up with the commentary, is how I would describe it.
Yeah, I mean, even not just the commentary, but I guess like the backstage booking, right? They have Gary Michael Capetta later go to check on AJ, and Ray was like, "Oh, he'll be okay." But even that, like Ray was like, "Yeah, he'll be fine."
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mixed message.
We cut to CM Punk backstage. Punk says, "Ever since I got into this business," and then he cuts himself off and says, "No, ever since I was born, wrestling has been my life." So I guess CM Punk as a baby was really devoted to grappling. Punk calls himself the uncrowned King of Ring of Honor and says tonight he'll finally get to wear a crown. He says the win over John Walters was for Colt Cabana, and he hopes Colt's shoulders heal up soon. Punk says Ace Steel is in Japan right now, and the win over Doug Williams was for him. Punk says when Doug is back in Britain eating beans on toast for breakfast, he'll be partying with a Pepsi in one hand and Tracy Brooks in the other. Punk then says Lucy is retired. I guess feeling the need to mention her because she was on a couple shows ago, and he doesn't blame her for retiring. She helped them get revenge on Christopher Daniels. Punk then turns his attention to the match ahead, saying AJ has beaten him in Ring of Honor before, but he knows that AJ's knee is hurt and he's bloodthirsty. He's going to go after that knee. And then finally, Punk finishes by saying that after he wins the Pure Belt, he's going after the tag and world titles. And the one thing I did like about that part of the promo is, like, he actually is kind of laying out what he'll be doing for the rest of the year, because he will have a feud with Samoa Joe over the world title, and he will win the tag title. So it's not just like a false platitude, like a false boast for once. It's really what he's going to do. And
Punk is telling the truth, because he was actually born with a crippling competition addiction.
That's his only addiction, in fact, I've heard. I've heard it told.
Yeah.
So next we somewhere else backstage, it's Gary Michael Capetta at intermission, and he's talking to HC Loke. Loke is incensed over what happened tonight. He says DeVito had to bring his daughter to the show tonight because he couldn't trust her at home. She would have run off to a rave. I still feel like bringing her to a show, a Ring of Honor wrestling show, especially where Special K is there, maybe not the best idea, but who am I to question a parent? I don't have kids.
But it's because his wife is in rehab again.
Yeah, that's he goes on to mention. He says that the girl's mom is in rehab, so she couldn't look after her. And then Loke confirms that the girl with Angel Dust was DeVito's daughter. He says the Carnage Crew doesn't care about winning a match with Special K. They're going to kill them. Loke then asks Gary to give him any information he learns about the whereabouts of DeVito's daughter. Gary promises him he'll try and find some.
The whole, taking my daughter to wrestling reminds me of, I think it was an Iggy Pop Behind the Music, where Iggy's mom was having trouble with Iggy's wife was having trouble with their son, so she sent them to be with Iggy while he was on tour, which just seems like a terrible idea. And that's the general idea. I gotta keep an eye on my daughter. I'll take her to this pro wrestling event. And clearly, nothing bad will happen.
Yeah, I said sending her on tour with Iggy Pop seems like a worse than normal idea, even for a rock star.
And also, like even thinking like she's a 13-year-old girl and they left her alone backstage. Like, I wouldn't do that if my daughter wasn't fully invested in the raving lifestyle. Like, I would want somebody watching her. I mean, get a babysitter.
And if she goes to enough ROH shows, she might have been the Raven lifestyle, which is possibly even worse.
Okay. Ring of Honor Tag Team Title match. The Briscoes, Jay and Mark, successfully defend the Ring of Honor tag titles by defeating the Backseat Boys of Johnny Cashmere and Trent Acid in 8 minutes flat when Jay pins Cashmere after he hits a Jay Driller. Matt, they had been building up this match on a few, probably since at least late 2003, probably for 4 or 5 shows. And it's 8 minutes, and I'll tip my hat. I don't think it's good. What do you think? How do you think about this for maybe a match between probably the two of the most well-known tag teams of the U.S. independent scene of this time frame?
Well, speaking of the Raven lifestyle, it speaks a lot to say that one of the most memorable parts of this 8-minute match is when Gabe gives shout-outs to the people that were in ROH the previous year, and thanks Raven. Says Red's coming back, says Teddy Hart's coming back next month, says Jody Fleisch is retired. Nope. So like, and it just brought me back great memories of that scramble match from the year before, where he spent like literally the entire match avoiding talking about anything about the match. This time it was only 8 minutes, so he does talk about the match a little bit. And yeah, I agree with you. The match, not very good. There's a handful of cool moves, I guess. It's really worked like a tornado match. And it's so short that I'm almost like, well, this is sort of like them burying the Backseat Boys on the way out. Like, that's basically what I took it as. Because I couldn't think of another, like, reason that it would be like this. But there were some cool moves, such as when Acid ran up the ropes and Mark just, like, pulled him down. I thought that was cool. But then there was a spot where like Jay had to save Mark from the T gimmick, but Jay was late, so they were just like holding Mark up awkwardly. It's like that's never good because they do the T gimmick pretty fluidly usually. Mark's big spot is like he does a tornado DDT from the top on Acid, who's on the apron through a table on the floor, and I say that was a really good spot. And then immediately after that, Jay hits a spike J driller on Kashmir for the win. But yeah, it felt like it felt like them trying to squash the Backseat Boys. That's what it felt like to me.
Joe, what did you think?
All right, so, and to tie it all together, my scoops earlier, while I was at this show, I was perusing the merch stands pretty close to showtime. I heard Rob Feinstein say something like, oh, the backseats aren't here yet, don't know where they are. So I'm kind of wondering if they showed up late. Maybe that's why the Ring Crew Express segment, maybe that got bumped up a little earlier. That was supposed to be post-intermission. Maybe they switched spots with this. And maybe the backseats got there late. They just didn't have time to put a match together. That's why we got what we got, which was just like, they just wrestled for a bit and then went to the finish at 8 minutes. It was just monstrously disappointing.
It's funny, though, isn't it? Because didn't they do an angle in Boston over like in like September where the Backseat Boys were late and got in trouble for it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And Johnny Kashmir, like we've talked about this, I think on a prior episode, but I found a shoot interview he did, and he has some pretty he did not leave on good terms. It sounds like so. Maybe that was them trying to take some real friction and turn it into something, or maybe it's art imitating life. I don't know.
Yeah, this match was just they just wrestled for a bit. I like the big acid bump off the top. But it was just, considering the magnitude of both teams' stature, that just, an 8-minute match, that was just nothing. It was just kind of shrug.
Well, this is also the end of the Backseat Boys in ROH. I mean, Acid comes back, but is never really pushed, and this is the last time Kashmir is there at all.
Yeah. I guess before I give my thoughts, one thing I want to ask you guys, I thought this was kind of a weird thing from the Observer report. I guess, Dave didn't see the show, but he got live notes. Did you guys notice this? I'm going to just read it to you, because I didn't. Dave writes, the other major matches were Briscoes over Backseat Boys to keep the tag titles in a match described as both short and disappointing, with the crowd turning on it when the Briscoes threw some weak-looking chops. I don't remember that being the turning point of this match. I don't even remember the chops.
I don't remember anything. I don't remember anything like that.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have anything like that in my show report. So.
But sometimes just one person notices something and misinterprets something, and that's what becomes the record. I definitely I've mentioned this on the show before. I had an inaccurate thing said in an Observer report that I wrote for a SmackDown taping that ended up just being in the Observer, and then I realized I was wrong, and I was like, oh well, it's too awkward to correct this.
Yeah, I remember once I wrote when I was some pimply faced geeky 16-year-old or something, a house show report. And I remember the weird power I felt when Dave posted it on his website, because I was like, I could have made up shit. I could have said anything here. It's weird to think you're thinking, oh, they're getting double and triple checked and stuff, but it's no, when it comes to house shows, it's basically, it feels like he's just taking your word for it. So
for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, what else is he going to do? But go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, obviously with TV stuff, he's getting a variety of sources, but I guess the thing I always try and keep in mind with stuff like this Ring of Honor stuff where, one or two people from the live events could tell him something and he might be reporting it when it might just be the weird perspective of one or two people that wrote to the Observer after the show.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, this crowd, you listened to it all night, they were not going to turn on a match because guys gave weak chops.
I will say this match was one of the only matches of the night where if you hear at the start of the match, the crowd is chanting and they're excited, and as the match goes on, the crowd gets quieter and quieter, which is the opposite of what you want in a wrestling match. So I think that speaks to the quality of this match, which I agree with you guys was disappointing. There was something weird, like there wasn't necessarily a ton of outright botches, although there was a couple things I noticed.
Well, the thing with Jay Briscoe and the T gimmick was the biggest one I noticed.
Yeah, and there was one more where there was stuff like that, but it also just seemed, I would describe just like kind of herky-jerky, where the pacing, like everything seemed like it was an effort to get everyone in the places they needed to be and on the same page for things. And it was mostly just them hitting signature moves, but it was short length, and also it didn't have a high degree, everything seemed like it was an effort to pull this stuff off. And there was that big spot you mentioned where Mark puts someone through a table, but even that, I noticed, like, the camera angle, you couldn't really see the table break, and you also saw, like, Mark took that entire bump for Trent Acid, which is probably the right thing to do, but the camera angle made it so obvious that it was basically Mark going ass first through a table, and then Trent Acid tumbling after him. But I guess, like, the biggest review of this match will be much like the biggest scramble ever at the first anniversary show. The fact that they picked this match, as you guys mentioned, to basically do their yearly let's thank everybody that's worked in the company this year, when it's supposed to be like a big tag team title match, like that's a pretty damning indictment of what they thought of this match.
Exactly.
But after the match, we cut to who knows where, and oh my god, it's Brian Kendrick, a.k.a. Spanky. He's been released from WWE or asked out, I forget. He cuts a short promo about how some people say you can't go home again, but he goes over some of his early Ring of Honor memories and wonders if maybe you can. So,
I was going to say, Spanky was sort of known for his like charismatic character and like kind of just being like kind of a good personality, but he didn't show that at all here. He might as well have been Jerry Lynn in this promo.
I also think Spanky's kind of like, his character is, in the original run of his original Ring of Honor run, is this cocky goofball, and here I think he's being pushed into kind of this role of like just the good guy that's like, Ring of Honor was great and good times, I want to come back, where that is so not what he was in Ring of Honor. He was like the goofy guy wearing like clothes he got from the Goodwill and oversized novelty sunglasses. And
if Donnie B is to be believed, he also might be a mass shooter.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's not playing to his strengths as a character. But it's interesting to, it's crazy to think that he's already back, and he's not going to be like a regular fixture, but he is coming back. So we have that to look forward to.
Yep.
Then we cut to Gary Michael Capetta outside AJ Styles' locker room. Gary says AJ is getting his knee injury treated, and he tries to go in to get the scoop, but Jimmy Rave opens the door and stops him. Rave says AJ is fine, he's going to be great for the main event, but he will not allow Gary into the locker room. Nice try, Gary, at least. But that brings us to the Ring of Honor World Title 4-corner match. Samoa Joe retains. He defeats BJ Whitmer, Dan Moff, and Low Ki when he made BJ Whitmer tap out to the rear naked choke. This match is interesting to me because I don't know how I would rate this match, because there are parts of it that are just fine, and there are parts of it that are fantastic. And this probably won't be a surprise to people. The parts that are fantastic are when Samoa Joe is in the ring with Low Ki. And it is like they pick right up where they leave off in Joe's debut Ring of Honor match in 2002. They hit each other about as hard as I've seen people hit anyone since we've been doing this podcast. So hard at some points that I almost was on the verge of feeling uncomfortable. And there's just this electricity when those two wrestle each other. It feels epic and special in a way that even a lot of really good matches in Ring of Honor don't feel. It feels like there's just something in the air when those two stand off against each other. And the whole match overall was good action, but really those, like, their sequences at the end being so good almost make the rest of the match look worse than it is to me, because those were so fun. And before I throw it over to you guys, I guess the big story of this match that I haven't mentioned yet is Samoa Joe cuts his hand. He does a tope suicida, or I guess the elbow suicida he calls it, where he goes elbow first to the outside, and he puts his hand lands on the guardrail, And as Joe tells it, it cuts the hand basically to the bone. People know who have been following Ring of Honor around this time. Ring of Honor was infamous for these super sharp sheet metal guardrail signs that the edges never got sanded down. Lots of guys got cut on them. Joe, probably the most severe cut anyone ever suffered on one of these. And you can see at one point Joe just looking at his hand and realizing he cut himself. In fact, I found a Joe shoot interview where he gets up from a move and he looks around, he sees blood everywhere, and he goes, instantly I'm looking, it's like, is BJ cut? Is Moff cut? Is Key cut? And then he looks at his hand and goes, oh shit, I'm cut. Like, I can see the bone. Like, and you can see, I looked on the video release, you can see Joe in the corner, actually, like, his eyes bug out looking at his hand, like him realizing, oh shit, I cut my hand.
Gabe even mentions that he looks like he's in shock when he sees it.
Yeah, I guess Joe says he was watching the match later with CM Punk, and that Punk was making fun of him. Like, look at you, just looking at your match like an idiot, your hand like an idiot. Like, Punk was like laughing at him for seeing so obvious. But like, blood is just gut. Like, you can see it dripping out of his hand at one point. And so for the rest of the match, people are trying to get Joe tape. I guess Joe asked somebody for tape. And so people from the back are trying to get Joe tape, but they keep getting him different kinds of tape to tape up his hand, and they're not sticking. And by the end of the match, Joe just has this bloody wad of different kinds of tape. And Joe in this shoot interview, it's pretty funny the way he tells the story, where he's just like, he goes, at one point they brought me Scotch tape, and he was just like, Scotch tape? And they bring him like electrical tape and duct tape, and he's like, clearly he just wants athletic tape, but I guess they were just panicking and finding him like any tape they could find. And he just has this weird amount of tape on his hand by the end. But credit to Joe for like knuckling through this, so to speak. Matt, what did you think about this match? A lot going on in this, actually.
Yeah, I liked the match a real lot, like the whole thing. I thought that the fact that Joe had the thing with his hand actually added a lot to the match. I don't want that to happen, but like it added a hook for the part where the Prophecy was working over Joe. Because first of all, everyone wanted to eat Joe's blood, it seemed like, or drink Joe's blood. Because at one point, the ref, when he's trying to get off the tape, like he bites off the excess tape, and everyone's like, ew. Then immediately after that, Moff bites at Joe's hand, and everyone's like, ew. And then Whitmer bites at Joe's hand, and everyone's like, ew. And the only person that wasn't like going after Joe's blood, I guess, was Loki. At different points, like at one point, Joe tagged himself in from Loki, and he did it by slapping Key so hard in the face. Like, I just put so hard, like it was underlining the word so. It was crazy. And then Key like broke up an STF that Joe had on with like a crazy kick to Joe's head. They saved the Joe versus Loki parts for like 20 minutes into the match. And, like you said, when they did it, it was awesome. But I thought Loki looked motivated here. Like Loki, it wasn't like, oh, I'm in for a little break and I'm just gonna, kind of half-ass it. He was full on Loki in this match, and it was great. And I liked the finish too, because Joe and Loki were like going at it. They were doing everything you'd want them to do. And then Moff speared Loki out of the ring, and it allowed Joe to choke out Whitmer. I liked the part where Joe and Key both had their submission finishers on the Prophecy, but they just happened to be positioned where they were staring at each other. So they let go of the holes to beat the crap out of each other some more. I don't know. I thought this was really good. I think maybe without Joe's blood, the middle part would have dragged, but I think it didn't because like of that hook. And the part where Joe did get hurt, I thought was really good because he did the elbow suicida. He was just like throwing everybody around the ringside area. I just thought the match had such good energy, and the crowd was so on fire for it. So I thought this was the match of the night easily. I thought it was like the only real match of the night that felt like special, and I thought it did feel pretty special. So I'm very high on this match.
I actually have some thoughts based on your thoughts, but I think at first we should go to Joe. Joe, what were your thoughts and memories about this match?
Yeah, I remember Gabe running out with some tape at some point.
Did you actually? I want to ask. Actually, sorry. Some people live have said, I believe this was one of those. I think actually Joe said it during the shoot interview that he could hear from the ring Gabe having a tantrum in the back once he cut his hand open. Like, could you hear anything? Do you remember that?
I don't remember hearing anything specifically. Someone on Twitter, as Eric Eels, just to give credit, said Gabe threw a chair against the wall after Joe hurt his hand. Which, it sounded like a classic Gabe tantrum. I didn't really pick up on any of that. I was probably focused on the match. But like you said, the Joe key parts were the most electric part of the show by about a factor of 10. It was just crazy, and it just kills me we never got that kind of Joe title defense against him for whatever reason. But I like the match. Match as a whole was very good. It was kind of structured like a tag match to start with Moff and Whitmer working together, which does make sense in that context. I don't know if we ever kind of stated the rules, but if Joe scored a pinfall, there would be no number one contender. But if someone pinned Joe, they became the champ. But if someone else pins someone else, they would be the number one contender. So it's a little... I don't know why Joe tagged in at all. I would just kind of, sit on the floor for this portion of the match.
And when Gabe says those rules, he calls them simple.
Yeah, we need Scott Hudson there to say it's really quite simple. Yeah. It was, but at the end, it really picked up. But when Joe and Key had the dual submissions on, Joe was yelling "Trophy or the belt" at Key, meaning, do you want to get the number one trophy or do you want to come at me and get the belt? And then they had their big showdown, which was tremendous. But this was a really good match with the best parts being just like off the charts.
I thought one thing that was good about it was it's a different kind of four-way, because four-ways often in Ring of Honor, they're just basically scrambles with four singles wrestlers. But I felt like these four guys, they all kind of have that aura of the hard-hitting, like, dude. And plus they had the background of Low Key and Dan Moff, with their history, and the Low Key and Samoa Joe have history. So I felt like you had a bit more emotion in this match, but also, like, there was an identity to this match that was more than just a lot of spots. Like, there was a lot of hard hitting, and it made sense that, these are four of the hardest hitters ever in the company so far. And so they're going to have that kind of match. And it was interesting, like you said, Joe, that, they did kind of work it as a tag match, which was the one thing I thought was a bit weird, that BJ Whitmer was basically like the face in peril for a while to start the match, and Key and Joe were basically tagging in and out and double teaming him, which is weird because, like, BJ Whitmer is not a face. He is like the innocent girl attacking, like, evil cult heel. And going to your point, Matt, I would just say that I thought the match did change with the blood, and in a way it became more compelling because of the blood. But the one thing I would disagree with a little bit was I felt like the action kind of slowed down at that point for a little bit until we got to the low-key Joe stuff, because it went from just guys doing like hits and moves, and became everybody biting Joe's tasty meat hand. And it was kind of hard after seeing guys hit each other so hard with punches and kicks to just see, like, to get my hackles up. I don't know what the word is for just guys chewing on a hand. Because I just thought Joe is not going to submit because someone is biting a cut on his palm. But I actually, at the same time, I do appreciate that Moff and Whitmer both thought on the fly and took an unplanned injury and rolled with it. They were like, we're going to focus on this now because this is a real thing that's happening here. So I did appreciate that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I still think that the match probably would have slowed down anyway, and this just gave it a bit of a hook. But I see what you're saying. Yeah,
but again, I really the high points of this match were my favorite parts of the night too. I agree with you. PW Torch reported that Samoa Joe needed 7 stitches and a tetanus shot in his hand. To close up that cut. And I believe Joe mentioned in his shoot interview that AJ Styles, nice guy that he is, actually stayed with Joe at the hospital that night as he was getting treated.
Nice.
So
I don't know why they'd need to give, I guess I would say, the tetanus shot in the hand, because I figure that's just in the body, but I'm not a doctor. What do I know?
Yeah. And it was interesting that they, that Key was back, because he did have such a bad falling out with Ring of Honor a few months earlier. But again, as the Observer said, they said, quote, it was to something to drive. Ring of Honor was looking for something to drive last week ticket sales, and both the Observer and the Torch and PW Insider all basically said the same thing, which was, low key, he might come back one day, but right now it's a one-shot commitment because he has so much stuff going on in Japan.
It's weird to think that this was his first match back in 7 months. That's a long time.
And it's funny because there was that time, shortly after Low Key left and that story came out, where one of the shows they mentioned Low Key, maybe Steve Crano during a mic work thing, and the fans booed. And here he gets the welcome back chant. So, it's funny the difference a few months makes.
Yeah.
where now he's beloved again. And
different market too. That's part of it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
Loki has such an aura live that, you know, you're not going to be like, boo, when he comes out. You know.
Yeah,
You're gonna be glad to
exactly.
see him.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're going to be scared he's going to hurt you if you
Yeah.
But-
Oh, there was one point in this I wanted to forget where I think it was Loki and Whitmer were in the ring, and like the ref doesn't kind of pinfall. He says like Whitmer's not the legal man, but Whitmer and Key keep wrestling, and I guess the ref's just like, oh, screw it, and it starts counting pinfalls anyway. Like, well, that gotta, you know, it'd look really dumb if I just don't count pinfalls at all. So he just threw his hands up.
And it was interesting, too, that Gabe's justification for this, for Key being inserted into this match for the title, was just basically, Key said they couldn't do an anniversary show without him, and he's such a legend, we put him in it. Like, it is one of those things that's kind of weird where sometimes Gabe tries so hard to tell you that, you know, the number one contenders trophy is so important, and we have a lot of structure and rules, and the top 5 rankings is important. But at the same time, hey, a guy that used to be a star here wanted to come back for a match, so we put him in the world title match. Like, it's one of those things that I'm interested to see with AEW, which is this idea that when you say wins and losses are going to matter, I respect that, but it's so hard if you're being really like stringent with those things when sometimes you just have to push a guy into the middle of something out of nowhere to then not make that look bad. Like, to put Loki in just because you need tickets to sell, but then have to justify why he's getting a world title match when he left the company on bad terms and hasn't been around in 7 months. Like, but, you know, it happens. So, after the match, Joe and Key have an intense stare down, and it really sucks that it makes you so excited to see them have a match, and we never get another one in Ring of Honor. A singles match between the two, that is. Elsewhere, we see Jerry Lynn somewhere, who says he couldn't be at the show tonight, but he's keeping a close eye on the Pure title tournament, because as he awkwardly raises his voice to scream, Pure Wrestling is exactly what I'm made of. You know it! So that was a very awkward promo.
You know his famous catchphrase, you know it?
And that brings us...
The original Zack Ryder. Sorry, I had to say it.
Woo, woo, woo. And that brings us to the main event match, the Pure Wrestling title tournament final match. AJ Styles defeats CM Punk via pinfall in 16 minutes, 37 seconds, after he hits a Styles Clash off the second turnbuckle to become the first ever Ring of Honor Pure Wrestling title champion. Joe, I'm going to let you lead off the match, but first I think we should talk a fair bit about... This is probably the time of the show we should talk about the Pure Wrestling title, since this is the first match with the full Pure Wrestling title rules. But before we talk about that, I did a lot of research actually on trying to find quotes from Gabe about what his thought process was for this title. So I got a few quotes from some different sources here. The first was to the Pro Wrestling Torch. Gabe said that it's going to be given equal billing to the World Heavyweight title, and Gabe is quoted as saying, "What is the point of having a secondary title that just says you're second best?" Says Ring of Honor booker Gabe Sapolsky. And The Observer wrote, "The feeling is they needed to establish the new title by putting it on AJ Styles, who the fans see as a superstar, and the idea was to put the title on almost equal footing with the major singles title. If it was put on a mid-card guy, nobody would care about a new title." And then we finally go to Mike Johnson, who had an interview with Gabe Sapolsky around this time, and he has a few interesting little bits here. Mike Johnson asks, "Ring of Honor is considered by fans to be a wrestling-driven product, so why the hype and push into creating a pure wrestling title?" Gabe says, "Basically, it was time for another title, although I've always hated the idea of a secondary title. I mean, what is the point of going for something that shows you are second best? You don't see any team in the NFL win the divisional championship and then skip the Super Bowl because that was good enough for them. So we needed a concept that would give Ring of Honor another belt, but make it important and its own entity so it could compete with the world title as being Ring of Honor's top belt. With Ring of Honor going in new directions, like more storylines, characters, blood feuds, different types of matches, etc., it made sense to have signed that showed our fans that we will always stay true to our roots, no matter what other directions we go in. So no matter what happens in Ring of Honor, you are guaranteed a straightforward, no frills, great wrestling match on every show with a unique twist in the rules for pure wrestling title matches." Johnson then asks, "What will be so unique about the Pure division?" Gabe says, The rules of the Pure Wrestling title matches will set it apart in addition to allowing the wrestlers to show some creativity. There are 3 rules. The first is no closed fists. This will ensure that only the most realistic-looking strikes and kicks are seen in Pure Wrestling title matches. The second is that there will be a 20 count on the floor. I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of countouts on the floor, which is why Ring of Honor never had a 10 or 20 count on the floor. However, if used once a show, it can definitely be a very effective false finish or finish, and it can add to the drama of the match. BJ Whitmer and Homicide proved that at Main Event Spectacles when we did a test run of the 20 count, and it led to a great false finish in the match. The main rule is the 3 rope break rule. Each guy will only get 3 rope breaks to stop a pinfall or submission. Once he uses all 3, the ropes can't break a hold. This will lead to lots of strategy within the match and also some very unique and innovative submissions using the ropes. The possibilities of interesting things that you can do with these rules, especially the 3 rope break one, are endless. Johnson asks, will the Pure Wrestling division workers be exclusive to that division? Gabe says, no, there is no reason to place any limits on anything. The Pure Wrestling title is about competition at its purest. This means that you can see several styles of wrestler compete for the title, from high flyers to strong style competitors. If a guy is athletic and can put on a realistic looking match, he more than qualifies for the division. Matt, kind of what do you think? I mean, looking back, everyone kind of doesn't have the nicest things to say about the Pure Wrestling division. It did have some good matches and moments within it. Kind of having heard this stuff, and just thinking back about the rules, what do you think kind of about it as a whole, like this concept and this philosophy?
Well, I get what Gabe is saying in some respects, but it's also hard for a fan like me who got into wrestling at a time when like the late 80s, early 90s, when the Intercontinental title was like the cool belt in the WWF. Like, the idea that secondary titles are bad is kind of hard to wrap my brain around, even though I get the argument. Like, I honestly do. But it's hard for me to actually feel that way, because I always liked the Intercontinental title, especially back when it was protected, and the U.S. title and TV title and WCW and all that stuff also. The idea that he was going to make that equal to the world title, obviously that didn't really stick, right? Once AJ left, they immediately made it a mid-card title when they brought it back, and it really stayed that way until kind of maybe McGuinness, kind of built it back up to have that kind of be a feud with Danielson, where they were trying to act like they were on equal footing, and that was 2 years later,
and that was the last champion.
Right, exactly.
Technically is, but he immediately just merged it.
Exactly. As far as the rules themselves, I don't know. I don't know. I don't hate them as much as most people do. I think they're a little bit kind of arbitrary, this 3 rope break thing. And I don't know that it ever really added that much. A 20 count, I think, actually can be good. It could add extra drama to near falls and stuff, or a different kind of near fall, I guess, is how I would say it, or false finish, I guess. The closed fist thing, whatever, that's obviously pointless. The one thing I noticed about this match, they did not announce the rules to the audience, which I thought was really strange, because they did that later on. But you would think that would be a major thing they would want to do, which would be very clearly be these are the rules, and maybe have the guy standing there while the referee tells them the rules, like they did at the tag title match at AEW. I don't know. I thought the presentation was a little bit off here.
Especially since this is, again, we've seen matches before where they did tests where it was just the 3 rope break rule, or the one match Gabe mentioned in the interview that was just the count out rule. This is the very first match that ever had the entire 3 pure wrestling rules. And unless we missed something that they cut out of the DVD, they do not explain to the crowd what those are. Joe, what are your thoughts about the pure wrestling thing as a whole, and do you remember live if they explained it even, or if people were confused?
I remember live the crowd understood what was happening. He grabbed the ropes, he lost the rope break. People, so I'm guessing they explained it, or people were they explained it online and people read it there. As far as the rules, I get where Gabe's coming from, But it's not like people didn't have interest in the U.S. title in WCW or the Intercontinental title because they're like, oh, these are just secondary belts. People did have an attachment to them. I don't know, like, what exactly you do in Ring of Honor because a lot of other independent groups had a light heavyweight title or something like that. CCW did, IWA Mid-South. That doesn't really work in Ring of Honor. Some groups have a TV title. Ring of Honor didn't have television. You can't really do any kind of geographical ones. So, I kind of get where they're coming from. The Pure Rules, it was, it's not like there were rounds or anything drastically. It wasn't drastically different from a normal match you'd see. And I think trying to put it on equal footing with the world title just kind of created confusion. Like, well, which one, are we supposed to be into? It was just, the whole thing was just kind of a weird failed experiment.
Yeah, my thoughts were, it's funny, finding that interview from Gabe, there was one line that kind of changed some of my thinking of this, which was, I always thought, why is he doing this? But there's that one line where he says, this title lets, like, it was something to the effect that this title lets people know that there's, no matter how Ring of Honor changes, there's always going to be good, like, wrestling on the show. And I feel like looking over the first couple of years of Ring of Honor, Gabe's booking had a lot of what I always say is mandated variety. Like for a long stretch, there was a hardcore brawl on almost every show. There was a scramble match on every show. There was a four-corner match on every show. And it almost feels like Gabe, I think he liked variety, and which I do too, and he really liked like being able to guarantee to the fans that like, look, by seeing that these kinds of matches are booked, you're going to get one of each of these kinds of matches no matter what show you go to. And part of me feels like the way he said that in the interview, the Pure title was almost like his idea of like telling the fans, look, this guarantees you're always going to get like one straight up wrestling match no matter what. But I feel like that's a problem he didn't need to solve because Ring of Honor always had multiple matches like that on every show before this title. Like there was never a show where I was like, man, nothing in Ring of Honor on this card, but hardcore matches. Or, there was always, quote-unquote, pure wrestling. And like you said, Joe, the rules are very arbitrary. Like, I don't know how many people are being like, man, that would have been a great technical wrestling match, but if only those guys hadn't punched each other in the face, or if only there were fewer rope breaks. Like, if anything, when I was growing up, I was listening to Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura telling me how guys using rope breaks was an example of how good a pure wrestler you were because it showed ring awareness. But
well, Jesse Ventura would say it was the cheap way out. That one I remembered.
Okay, well, Gorilla's the good guy then.
Yeah.
He's also teaching me about anatomy. But like I've said it before and I'll say it again, the pure wrestling title rules were like a solution to a problem nobody had. And it's funny, when Gabe brings up the tag ones, Gabe spent multiple matches in early Ring of Honor on commentary talking about how countouts were dumb, and that's why Ring of Honor didn't have them. And even in this interview, where he's introducing a division that has countouts, he even admits that he still doesn't like countouts. Like he's saying, well, once a show it could be neat. But it's clear that Gabe, it's actually something that kind of goes against his gut feeling, which is that counts are kind of dumb, especially because he said before that the refs just ignore the counts and they'll slow it down and the wrestlers will work on the outside forever anyway, so why have countouts? But
also, if you actually look at the history, I think there may be like one or two count-out finishes in a pure title match ever. There's one I remember involving Homicide, and like I don't know if I remember any others, honestly.
And I do think that I kind of see Gabe's idea of a secondary title, what's the point of fighting for second best? But at the same time, there's been a ton of great promotions that have had multiple titles that I've loved, like WWE in the late 90s to early 2000s. WCW/NWA in the 80s had 1 million titles, and I think people would say that's great wrestling, But there are also companies that have just had the one world title. Like, I think it can work both ways. I actually think the Ring of Honor didn't need a pure title. It just needed the world title and the tag titles. Like, I can see wanting to have a second title that was over, but I just feel like there wasn't enough reason to justify it. And especially with Gabe constantly saying the pure title isn't about technical wrestling, it's just about competition at its purest. We never get an explanation to what that means. And that also kind of tells you, like, if you're saying these matches are about competition at its purest, does that mean every other match on a Ring of Honor show that isn't with these rules is not competition at its purest? Like, it's kind of weirdly shitting on everything else in a slight way. But, I mean, enough about that. I mean, let's get to the match. AJ Styles and CM Punk wrestled. Joe, what'd you think about the match itself?
Well, like I said, the crowd live understood like the rope break things and all that, but they did it in a weird way. Like, AJ has a wrist lock on Punk, so Punk grabs the top rope to kind of do a backflip out move we've seen a bunch, and the ref says, "Oh, that's a rope break," and Punk is complaining, and the commentary is like, "Oh, I don't know about that one." And then there's a later section where AJ has, I think, an illegal move on it, and Punk grabs a rope and loses another rope break, and the announcers are like, "Oh, the ref might have blown the call there," and it's like these rules are somewhat convoluted enough. I don't know why you're muddying them up right away with controversial calls. That's something you could get into later on. I think, they did a long spot where they were on the floor and they realized, oops, we're getting counted out, and they ran back in. And once they kind of got past kind of the demonstration of the rules and all that, beyond the count out, everyone lost their rope breaks. I enjoyed the match a lot by the end there, but it was just kind of a weird way to start the, something you were already kind of behind the 8-ball
on. Matt, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree with Joe about, like, I don't understand why they needed to introduce the weird, like, bad call angle here where Punk is like, it's a reversal, not a break, and it's everyone's like, yeah, and like, why is the ref so dumb? Like, the idea that in any circumstance somebody pushing their opponent into the ropes would be considered a rope break just seems like so dumb that no ref would have ever done that. I don't know. But there was some other stuff too. I thought that whoever was in charge of the spotlight, like when they went to the floor, did a particularly bad job here. Like, there were moments where they were fighting on the floor and it was like pitch black. And that's not usually what happens. Usually there's like a spotlight that like will get to them. There was a part where like Punk did a running dive into the crowd onto AJ and it was just pitch black. You couldn't see what was going on. Also, I should note, I thought that we were going to get our second show with zero violence against women. Zero. And then, out of the blue, you see Tracy Brooks. She's at ringside. This is the only match that she's at ringside with Punk for. And AJ and Punk are like doing crisscross spots, and all of a sudden AJ runs out of the ring and starts strangling Tracy Brooks. And as you pointed out to me, I'm pretty sure it was for no reason. I don't remember the camera showing her like tripping him. Not that that would make it okay, but like it just seemed like AJ was just desperately wanting to strangle this woman who was at ringside. And like he just really like he grabbed her by the throat. Like, and it was like, wow, like imagine there ever being a time in wrestling, never mind like in the 21st century, where people were just like, yeah, that's fine. That's not really that anything I will remember or think about. Really, really strange. As far as the match itself, I agree with Joe. Like, the selling by AJ was kind of spotty. Like, just like in the previous match, like he would sell his leg, then he wouldn't. And like you said, Gabe maybe like pushed it more than it actually was pushed in the match itself. But once they got down the stretch with their reversals, and like there was a really cool spot where they repeated the ending of their first match at Tradition Continues, where Punk went for the Shining Wizard, and and then AJ caught him in the Styles Clash, but this time Punk kicked out, and I thought that was like a really good earned near fall.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I don't know. I really liked that, like getting the Top Roach Styles Clash, where he was doing the Styles Clash like facing back into the ring and like turning inward. I thought that was like a different way of doing it. I thought that was a really good finish. I don't know. I thought like it got pretty good and dramatic near the end. I thought the rules clearly seemed like a work in progress. There were some spotty moments, so I didn't think it was like a fully great match. But I thought it got to the point of being very good. And like the crowd, they were tired, and the wrestlers seemed tired. But everybody like worked their hardest to stay into it, so it still felt like a main event. Maybe mildly disappointing considering, but I'd still say a very good match.
Where would you compare this versus their? I mean, I don't know if our memories are going to be up to the task, but where would this compare to their previous singles match that they've had in Ring of Honor?
I like the first match better. I thought for
too.
one thing, the expectations were maybe not the same, so like they were able to surprise you. They did a lot of innovative stuff in that first match, which I don't think happened here. But this match was good. Like I'm not like it's not like that match blew this one away or anything, but that's definitely the better of the two in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I thought this match was good, but the way I would compare it to the first one would be if the first one I would put at like 3 3/4 to 4 stars. This is more like a 3.5 to 3 3/4. It's just a notch below. It's not that much worse, but it's not quite as good as the last one.
The rules and I think like some of the production stuff like took it down a little bit.
I absolutely agree, especially like Joe was mentioning. That it is clearly like an intentional part of the story that both of Punk's first 2 rope breaks that he got caught on weren't really his fault. And even on, especially on the second one where AJ ties him up in the ropes with a submission, Gabe and is outright saying, Punk got the shaft on this. That's not right. And I think that's such a bad decision to have this match like this, because on one hand, I know what Gabe's doing and it makes perfect sense, because the very next show, it's a CM Punk AJ Styles rematch. So you need, if it's good, the third time they've wrestled in less than a year, you need a reason for them to have a rematch if you're going to go to that match. And so
and the rematch has a special referee, so like the whole referees thing comes into play also.
Yeah, so in that sense, it's all booking 101, and it makes perfect sense, and it's very logical. But I guess my problem is, one, you're doing it in the very first pure rules match ever. And like kind of what Joe was alluding to, like I think that really gets it off on the wrong foot, because you're basically telling the fans, hey, here's what you can look forward to, fans, with the pure title stuff. The ref's getting the call wrong. Like, more things for the ref to screw up. Isn't this a great new kind of match? Like, it was almost like, you know what it reminds me of is when Impact a few years ago, they tried to do that new title that they quickly got rid of, where it would be in rounds, the matches would be in rounds, and then 3 judges would give on the score. And they were like, Impact was doing stuff like, oh, the judges can get the call wrong, or there could be draws. And it's like, this is just what fans have been missing. Like, judges screwing up results or draws. Like, it's like, this is the wrong first impression to give for this. Because to me, if I watch this match, I'd be like, is this what we're going to see from now on? Like, refs fucking things up? And the other thing that I think is not great about it is, CM Punk is the heel here, and he's getting screwed over. Like, the optics of that are kind of weird. Like, we're being put in a position where we're supposed to feel bad for the guy that's been a dick all night that the crowd has been booing. Like, even Gabe kind of is like, he's kind of grudgingly like, I got to give it to Punk there. Like, I usually don't see it his way, but, he's getting, that wasn't the right. But it's like, he shouldn't be in the position where he's having to, like, say that like a heel is getting screwed over. That those two things work against each other. But as far as a match, I think AJ is like a sneaky good opponent for Punk. Normally, I think when Punk wrestles really athletic guys, he tries to match them like for pace and athleticism, and that usually doesn't work out. But I think with AJ, for some reason, AJ actually slows down a little bit, and for some reason, I just think they work well together. And even though this match was not as good as the last one, I still feel like there's something about their offense where Punk's offense has more weight to it when he's wrestling AJ, and they just work. It's a sneaky good combination. They work well together. I agree with you, Matt. The near fall off the Shining Wizard thing that played off the last match, that was like a perfect earned near fall where I felt like Punk didn't earn kicking out of 2 Chaos Theories in the last match. I felt like this is an example where you can have a guy kick out of a finisher and it feels completely earned because it's referenced in a previous match, and you can see yourself going, Punk has enough strength to know, like, I've got to succeed where I failed before. There was some really good action in this, but just, yeah, and even the end did kind of smartly show how the 3 rope break rule can affect things, because when AJ hits the second rope Styles Clash and gets the pin, he's so close to the ropes that Punk gets his leg on the ropes, but it doesn't matter because they've both used up their rope breaks. So that's a good example of like, hey, fans, like, it's not just submissions. If you use up your rope breaks, you can get pinned right on the edge of the ring and it doesn't matter. But one other thing I thought was a little weird was, I don't know if you guys noticed this, So in the third rope break that Punk ends up using, his third rope break, he gets AJ in this submission where they're both kind of on their knees, and he ties up his legs with AJ's. But then AJ tries to counter. He leans back and he grabs Punk's head and he torques on his neck. So AJ gets out of the neck hold, but then Punk gets out of the neck hold, but then Punk immediately grabs the ropes to break up the hold. Because at that point, if he gets out of the neck hold, the hold he's in is a hold he applied to AJ. Like, he's grabbing the ropes to get out of a hold he put on. It was really weird. But I don't know if you guys noticed that or not.
I think I remember the spot. I get what you're saying. Yeah, like they didn't do anything to change the position of their legs, so it wouldn't actually make him the victim of the hold.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at. And yeah, the other thing, like going to what Joe said one more time, the AJ's selling of the legs was really spotty here, and really it wasn't a huge focus of the match. Like, it was there, and Punk put a couple submissions on, but it was never a huge deal. And even near the very end of the match, the move AJ hits to set up his finisher is a big jumping Pele kick to Punk, who's standing on the turnbuckle. Like, it's that same thing again that we saw all night, which is, yeah, AJ's selling a leg injury, but he's doing a ton of really leg-intensive moves and really not being the worst for it at all. And yeah, that is one of the things that kind of takes this match down a bit. But still, like, a good, enjoyable wrestling match. It's just, you would maybe hope for a little bit better, but that ends the match. And so after the match, we get a ton of Ring of Honor staff and undercarders hit the ring to congratulate AJ. Punk protests the result, thinking he should have still had a rope break, so that pin shouldn't have counted because he had his leg on the ropes. He and AJ share an intense stare down. Samoa Joe hits the ring holding his Ring of Honor title. His hand is wrapped in a towel. It's still all bloody. He gets on the mic. He tells AJ he spent a year making the Ring of Honor title a world title, making it mean something, and by comparison, AJ's title means nothing. The crowd chants, "Fuck him up, Styles, fuck him up." Joe congratulates AJ, and he tells him that the only reason he has that belt is that he couldn't beat Joe for his belt. I thought that was like a really good line that, quite frankly, AJ I don't think has a great comeback for. AJ gets on the mic and he says the pure title means everything to him because, and then he says something that I couldn't make out over the house mic. I think he said something like, because he earned it in Boston. AJ says Joe beat him and the pure title isn't going to be the last belt he's holding. They shake hands. AJ praises Boston and their fans a bit more.
Yeah, so I feel like you're underplaying this. At one point he's like, so he goes, he says, you know, it's great, like, this belt means everything because I won it in Boston. And then afterwards he's like, let me be from Boston for just one night. And I'm just like, wow, AJ Styles really loves Boston. Like, he just loves Boston more than any. Joe, do you love Boston as much as AJ Styles loves Boston?
I don't think that's possible.
Yeah.
Is there a statue of AJ next to Bobby Orr, maybe? Like, has he really won them over on that level?
I think it's the other way around. I think, like, AJ has a statue of Boston outside his house.
There's just the big gold state.
Yeah.
Although AJ's never wrestled in Boston, which is still funny to me. But anyway,
like
10 miles outside of Boston.
Oh, so wait, he hasn't been at a WWE show in Boston?
Well, I mean, at this time.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm going to assume he's been at the TD Garden or whatnot.
Maybe that's why he said, let me be from Boston just tonight, because he knew Ring of Honor would never run Boston. So it's just like, let this be Boston in our minds one time, please.
Yeah.
We're going to, like, revere in a few months. Like, just.
Speaking of which, he reveres Boston.
So, yeah, so, like Gabe was saying before, they're going immediately to the idea that this title is on par with Joe's world title and that there's going to be a collision course, which is pretty interesting to do, like, right away when a guy has just won the title. You're already asking the questions like, when's he going to face the world champ? Which, again, they never get to, but things happen, which we will talk about maybe on the next episode.
Maybe.
So, next up we get Colt Cabana doing Good Times, Great Memories live from somewhere in Chicago.
I think it was actually taped at the very next live show.
Yeah. I mean, live in finger quotes here.
Yes.
He says Punk got screwed tonight, and he couldn't be with him because the Prophecy injured his shoulder on a previous show. Colt introduces his guest, Ace Steel, who says, Larry Sanders, who? Which made me feel very old to remember how long ago this was. Ace said that... Ace and Colt say it's not just Ring of Honor's 2nd anniversary, but the 13th anniversary of Chris Cross's hit Jump, and the 12th anniversary of Colt's Teddy Ruxpin singing that song. Colt says it's the 26th anniversary of Ace doing impressions, and Ace gives us some Jimmy Durante and a very mediocre Dusty Rhodes impression until the real Dusty Rhodes comes in. Dusty says Colt reminds him of a roll of toilet paper, and he says Ace is good, but Ring of Honor is all about honor. Dusty says Ring of Honor belongs to the boys, and that's why Dusty is coming to New Jersey with the Carnage crew. He tells Colt he's getting as bald as a watermelon, which is pretty funny because we're now at 15 years later. Colt, still full head of hair. Dusty talks about whipping Special K's high knees, and it's surreal to hear Dusty Rhodes talking about Special K.
Yeah.
Dusty says Ace can be a sidekick, makes another ass-whipping joke, and walks away. So
he was at the time trying to make sure that his, young son, his coming-of-age son, was not getting into the raving lifestyle. Because if he had, we would never have gotten AEW.
So yeah, Dusty is getting inserted into the Carnage Crew Special K feud.
I have to say, I didn't think Ace's impression was that bad. I thought it was decent.
I didn't think it was bad, but when I said mediocre, is because I feel like when it comes to Dusty Rhodes impressions, there's a lot of competition because it seems like everybody but me does a Dusty Rhodes impression.
Joe, let's hear your Dusty Rhodes impression.
Yeah, on the spot.
Oh, on the Boulderwood, baby.
See? That's not bad.
Yeah, not bad at all.
Dusty Rhodes. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah, good
That's
stuff.
at least a Steel quality.
Nice.
I'm telling you, and he did that on the spot without getting to plan for it, without Dusty watching him. So, and one more thing I should mention before we go into the final little segment. A note from the main event I forgot to mention was Ricky Steamboat. I guess the PW Torch said Ricky Steamboat, they actually wanted him to present the pure title to the winner of the match tonight, but he couldn't. And so they ended up doing the referee thing for him on the next show. So he was actually supposed to be here, but they just couldn't make the date work, I guess.
Okay, well.
But moving on, we return to backstage at the Ring of Honor show, not in Chicago, where Gary Capetta is backstage with his pal J-Train. He even puts his arm around Smokes. That might be the image for this episode. He has a big goofy grin. Gary says he couldn't understand half of what Smokes was saying earlier and asks again, where's Homicide? J-Train says Homicide is like Patrick Swayze, Whoopi Goldberg, he ghost. Smokes doesn't know where he is or when he's coming back. Gary says he'll find the scoop, and he puts his arm around Smokes again, who tells him to be like Michael Jackson and beat it.
Yeah, so I have to say, Smokes is probably not the best choice for an informational promo. You know what I mean? Something where it's okay, well, we really got to get this point across here. Who are we going to go to?
You can't be like, Julius, here's a bunch of exposition we need to get you need to get out in a short, succinct way.
Yeah.
Gabe says cut from behind the camera, so we get one of these classic Ring of Honor. It's the promo after the promo thing. And in comes some member of Special K I didn't recognize.
It was Cloudy, I think.
I think Cloudy, and he asks if yes, Julius Smokes if he has drugs, which seems vaguely racist.
I think he was asked, yes, that it is definitely, but I think he asked him for cocaine because I think he was snorted a little bit, and then Julius Smokes is oh, strawberry haze, that chocolate, that blueberry, and I'm just are you just making up nicknames for cocaine, or are these actual nicknames in any other place in the world?
I love the idea in my mind that Julius Smokes has actually never done a drug and doesn't know what they are. This crazy twist where he's you want some of that purple durple? What? He's just making things up.
Well, just the fact that he says he calls it strawberry haze, then he calls it chocolate, then he calls it blueberry. It's strawberry or is it blueberry? All right, I need to know which berry it is.
Also, if you watch this, Gary is playing along, making the goofiest, shocked faces as Smokes does this. And then Smokes out of nowhere just hits a really shocking headbutt to the kid, puts him in a headlock. Gary says the crew have been looking for a member of Special K, and so he runs off to find the Carnage crew.
But also, Julius Smokes yells at him, "Don't ever insult my intelligence like that again." And I feel that's just a weird thing to say in this circumstance also. What is he trying to say? He's a narc or something?
DeVito comes in, he starts choking the kid. He demands to know where his daughter is. The kid says Angel Dust, quote, has her. He doesn't have answers beyond this. The crew tells Smokes to leave because he doesn't want to see what they're going to do to this kid. Then the crew start heating up a wire with a blowtorch. And Gary tells the cameraman it's time for them to leave, presumably as they're about to like murder or brand this kid.
Both.
And that is how the show ends, except for the fact that if you bought this on DVD or VHS tape, it was a two-disc, tape set, and you got 45 minutes of second-year highlights afterwards. But obviously, we are not going to cover those.
You can listen to our second-year highlights in our archive.
Exactly. They take a little longer than 45 minutes, but they are worth it.
Yes.
So before we get some thoughts on the show, I'll just give you some thoughts from some other sources. The Observer wrote, this was said to be not a show with Match of the Year candidates, but a strong show nonetheless. And Mike Johnson wrote, Ring of Honor officials are ecstatic about how well the second anniversary show came off over the weekend and feel it comes off even better on video. Gabe Sapolsky says, it was booked like a movie. It came off better than I could have ever hoped. So with those hanging in the air, Joe Gagne, how did you feel about the second year anniversary show?
I think the Observer kind of touched on it. There was no real excellent match. No match I was going to say, hey, go watch this. You got to see this. But the whole show was real easy to watch, even though it was this was a 2 DVD set. I think the whole show went about 3.5 hours in total, a bit longer than average. But it was completely watchable. Most of the stuff was at least good. And there was a nice kind of flow throughout the show with the tournament ending in the finals. The only real disappointment was the tag title match. I pretty much enjoyed everything else to one level or another. So, not an all-time super show, but a definite thumbs up.
I thought the show was good. It is not a great Ring of Honor show, and it's definitely not up to the standard of the first anniversary show, which was like a loaded card that felt like a big deal. But I will say that I also agree with kind of the Observer thing. No Match of the Year candidates, but a strong show. And I feel like, Matt, we've been talking the last few shows how it feels like Ring of Honor's in the first rut that they've ever been since they've started. And this show did not feel like they're completely out of the rut, but it didn't feel like it was stuck in the rut, if that makes sense. Like, there was a lot of good stuff up and down the card, nothing that was really blow away, but it also didn't feel like, oh, this company's kind of just treading ground right now. What do you agree or do you disagree?
Well, I think that the crowd being hot for the whole show really helped it feel like it wasn't stale. Usually a show with a really hot crowd doesn't feel stale. I do think that there were some of the problems that we talked about were still evident, like just the lack of personality in the mid-card and stuff like that, and the lack of any super compelling storylines. But for the most part, I agree. I thought this was a quite good show. Very consistent, very watchable. And I would even go as far to say that I would recommend people go out of their way to see the title match, the world title match. I thought it was a very entertaining and different kind of match worth seeing. I think this was probably one of the better shows in a while. Better than the Battle Lines Are Drawn, which, was the one that you said they hyped up as like this all-time great show. Definitely better than that. I'm still waiting for the big change, but it's coming. And I thought this was good. This was better than I remembered, actually, and better than I expected.
Yeah, and so that was I think it is a surprisingly easy watch for 3.5 hours. So. Yeah. That brings us to the end of the show. If you want to contact us, at through the years at gmail.com is our email, THROH for through. We at Trevor Dame and at Mayor MGF on Twitter. We post on there are threads for the show on the Pro Wrestling Only message board, Voices of Wrestling, Figure 4. Joe, do you have anything extra to plug? Anything you'd like to mention?
There should be a new 5-star match game episode released pretty concurrently with this one. It's already in the can, dedicated to Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. So if you're a fan of that promotion, we had a bunch of fun on that one. And Twitter is Joe Gagne, Gagne. I used to plug Trevor's Twitter when he didn't have a lot of followers. I'm like, hey, this Twitter's great. More people should follow it. But now he's blasted past me in terms of followers, which is unacceptable. Although... you delve into a lot of dark corners and interact with a lot of, it's like pro wrestling discussion bum fights, basically. Things you get into. So you know what? You can have it. You can,
Yeah, my Twitter is a horror story that people best look away from. But we'll be getting into a different horror story next time on the years because
Trevor,
be coming at our best.
We have to do it. It's finally here. My nightmare is upon me.
This is the show I still have so much research to do. I've been putting it off for months. I told Matt like a couple months ago, like I'll share the file with all my research. I've barely touched it since then. I have so much stuff I have to read and listen to. This will be the most research intensive episode ever because between this show and the show we are covering next at our best is the Rob Feinstein scandal. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but we will do it in a way that's not going to be me reading things for 8 hours. But we're going to try and get all the information, break it down, try and sum up what the hell happened this year.
Well, it's going to be a longer than normal show. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, because we will still cover at our best. That episode, you're still going to get the usual review, but we will. And my mind is we're going to cover the whole story, the whole fall of the whole year, because it kept coming up throughout the year. We're going to do it all at once. It's going to be done in the next episode. So we will finally touch on all the facts of the Rob Feinstein scandal next time on Through the Years.
Wish us luck.
Yeah, wish us luck. Like, dear God, I'm gonna have to read a lot, but until then, have a good time and have a great time.